coming to force, allowing the government to take control of British Steel in Scunthorpe. MPs were recalled to Parliament for a rare Saturday sitting yesterday. It comes after the breakdown in negotiations with Jinye, the Chinese company that purchased the firm in 2020. Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds told the Commons the move was necessary to protect jobs.
It allows us to take control of British Steel's blast furnaces, maintaining steel production, and by extension protecting the company's 3,500 strong.
For our first romantic holiday to
Businesses hit by Donald Trump's tariffs will receive extra financial support.
I got a bag of food to feed the animals, a giant goat, then went for me, putting his front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence.
Arsenal boss Mikel Arteta insists their remaining 6 Premier League fixtures are really important, despite a 1-1 draw with Brentford as good as ending their title hopes.
With my girlfriend rolling off the floor.
Really challenging for what we are looking for in the Premier League, and without a sort of league, it's more unlikely to happen.
They're 10 points off the top and have played a game more than leaders Liverpool, who host West Ham this afternoon. Third place Nottingham Forest went down 1-0 at home to Everton after Manchester City climbed to fourth by thrashing Crystal Palace by 2. Elsewhere, Celtic are within touching distance of the Scottish Premiership title after a 5-1 victory over Kilmarnock.
The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand.
And Hollywood actor
shared
Nicky
online.
Rourke
He
has
quickly
been kicked
jerked
out of the
from
celebrity
the ostrich.
Big Brother house.
Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh Christ, you know," before driving off. And so I just said it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good morning to you. Just after 6 o'clock on Sunday, April the 13th. I'm David Bull, and this is Weekend Breakfast. Well, a very good weekend to you all. Just looking out the window, the weather, I don't think it's going to be quite as nice as yesterday, but don't fear, I have great news for you today. Yes, it's International Plant Appreciation Day today. It's a perfect day to bring home a new house plant and also to pamper those that are already in your home. Now, did you know that plants like it when we talk to them, and apparently they like classical music too?
Daffodil, heartsease and phlox, meadow sweet and lady smocks, gentian, lupin and tall hollyhocks, roses, foxgloves, snowdrops, forget-me-nots.
Well, that's a very good segue, because tonight it's the Eurovision party in London today. This is where current and former contestants showcase their songs in front of fans and international media. Now, Eurovision, I'm a huge fan, begins in exactly 1 month on the 13th of May in Basel in Switzerland. Yes! Our song is rubbish, by the way, this year. Also, it's International Scrabble Day, a day that celebrates the popular board game. The day was picked to honour its creator, Alfred Mosher Butts, who was actually born on this very day. Yeah?
We're playing Scrabble. We are obsessed. It's been 3 hours now and I'm getting depressed.
I'm always depressed playing Scrabble. Right, let's start this morning show, shall we? Today's fascinating facts. So today's fascinating facts, or this hour's fascinating facts, on this day in 1570 was the birth of Guy Fawkes. Yes, he was known as Guido Fawkes, the name he adopted whilst fighting for the Spanish in the Low Countries. Guy Fawkes belonged to a group of provincial English Catholics who planned the failed gunpowder plot at the Houses of Parliament in 1605. On this day in 1741, Britain's Royal Military Academy was established at Woolwich. It's now at Sandhurst. And on this day in 1742, George Frederick Handel's oratorio Messiah made its world premiere in Dublin, in Ireland. And those are this hour's fascinating facts.
Weekend mornings, we're taking flight. With David Bull, everything feels right. Weekend breakfast, shining like the sun.
Do Good morning, 4 minutes past 6 on Sunday, April the 13th. I'm David Bull. I nearly said I'm Dr. David Bull, and the reason I said that I'm Dr. David Bull is I'm joined by another doctor this morning. I'm joined by Dr. Raj Basu. Everyone needs a psychiatrist, including me. Good morning, Doctor.
You definitely need one, especially the thing about the plants.
Yes, what did you think?
Well, apparently you said the plants like being talked to. I just wondered, do you talk to plants, David?
I talk to everyone.
OK. And do the plants talk back?
Yes.
Oh, dear.
Yes, they do. And they like classical music, apparently. Do you know, when I wrote that, I thought of you. I had you in mind when I wrote it. Yes, I did. I really did. Yes, I did. It's nice to see you again.
Thank you very much.
Also, today, by the way, it's the boat race, the annual boat race, which is taking place between Oxford and Cambridge. Now, the women's race is at 1:21 p.m, the men's race at 2:21. Is it something you watch?
Well, I'm very suspicious about how these elite athletes that are fantastic rowers...
Suddenly do a degree.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Because we all know that in American universities, if you're like really good at American football or tennis, you don't seem to actually have to be able to write or read or do maths, but you get in. You get into Harvard.
I mean, you're absolutely right. And of course, this is between Oxford and University. It is a sort of annual fixture. It was first raced, the men's race, in 1829. It's one of the world's oldest and most famous amateur
exactly
sporting
but it was
events.
Genuine back then, not now,
it was,
though.
absolutely. It's 4.25 miles of tidal Thames in West London between Putney and Mortlake. There are 250,000 spectators on the banks of the river. I have to say, in the days that I have been to support it, and I went to a big sort of rowing medical school in London, so St Mary's Hospital was very big into rowing. And I have to say, and rugby, very much into rugby. In fact, at the interview, they said you didn't need to know any science. It was whether you caught the rugby ball they threw during the interview.
That was the reputation. I didn't apply to St Mary's because I was no good
at play rugby.
Yeah, exactly. There was no point. I was told there was no point.
It's very true, actually.
So.
But I have to say, when I have been to the boat race, it is a brilliant sort of atmosphere. It's very jovial, everyone having a great time, and that is the best of British sport, I think.
Yes, except the very best boat race was the one where one of the boats sank.
That's right.
So that's why I watch it, hoping for something, you know, more interesting.
Well,
an actual straightforward race.
Right. And of course, Cambridge wear the light duck egg blue, Oxford wear dark blue. So the timings this afternoon, 1:21 is the women's boat race, then the reserve women's, which is Azaris versus Blondie, 13:36. 13:51 is the men's reserve race, which is Isis versus Goldie, and 14:21, the 170th men's boat race. It's interesting, actually, the entry requirements, and you are right, you have to be studying at the university. All students must be studying on a full-time course. It is amazing how many Olympians suddenly find themselves studying astrophysics or bricklaying or whatever it is, isn't it?
Yeah, I do think that if you are an elite rower and you apply for Oxford and Cambridge, the rowing bit probably scores very high indeed, as opposed to the academic bit. This is why I'm suspicious. The system's been gamed. It's been gamed everywhere.
It is. Right, let's move on and talk about some very serious issues this morning. If you are just waking up, this story has moved on. This is the Sunday Times this morning. Navy on alert to escort fuel in steel crisis. As we know, of course, Parliament was recalled yesterday. We spoke extensively about that, but the latest line that is coming out this morning is ministers could send the Royal Navy to escort a fuel shipment to Scunthorpe's blast furnaces. Parliament yesterday voted to seize control of British Steel to ensure its survival. And a senior source said the government was considering the extraordinary move to ensure the cargo actually reached the United Kingdom without being intercepted or redirected. In terms of the cargo, the location and details of the cargo haven't been confirmed, but it's said to be coking coal, which we talked about yesterday. Of course, the government, in its infinite wisdom, has closed down any of our coal mines so that we don't actually have any coking coals, which, of course, is vital to keep the furnaces running. And without that supply, of course, it means the furnaces may well not be able to operate. And if they are closed down, it costs too much money to actually restart those blast furnaces at the steelworks. What's your feeling about this? I mentioned yesterday, I think the timing is extraordinary, that suddenly Jonathan Reynolds realised in the middle of parliamentary recess that there might be a problem with British Steel, even though Jingjae and the government had been in talks for a long period of time about trying to keep the steelworks open.
Well, a couple of things I'm puzzled about is the argument being advanced now is that steel is important for strategic reasons, and partly that would be about military stuff, that if we were in a war, we would need need to make armaments, so we need the steel industry. So I don't understand why they let a Chinese company own it for such a long time. It seems a bit like getting the Russians to own the manufacturing capability for nuclear submarines.
Yes.
And then wonder why it doesn't quite work.
Because there's no joined-up thinking.
Right, OK.
Is there? So also, I'd apply the same logic. Why do you have foreign powers being allowed to own nuclear power stations, for example, or energy infrastructure in this country? It makes no sense.
Yeah, well, the other thing that I think, I'm afraid I may be unpopular with you on this one, David, is that governments don't run things very well. So although as a temporary short-term measure, I can see why nationalisation might work. One of the problems is when we had the big financial crisis and the banks were too big to fail, and all the bankers suddenly became socialists and wanted government bailouts, we've been trapped by that ever since then, that the government bailouts occur, when ultimately, if a company isn't working, in the long run, does it make any sense to shore it up? They call them zombie companies. They're sort of really basically dead, but they're sort of being kept alive.
But just let's talk about the lack of thinking here, because what the government keeps saying is they want to close blast furnaces to have electric arc furnaces. Electric arc furnaces cannot make virgin steel because they don't get to the same high temperatures. So the government has shot itself in its foot.
OK. Right.
Hasn't it?
Well, yeah, well, again...
I've done a bit of research into this.
I can see that. Yeah, but I agree with you about the no joined-up thinking, but the trouble is that the public are falling for the short-term solution.
I would agree with that.
And they're not seeing that there's a longer-term problem.
But surely if it's strategic national interest, then surely we need to nationalise British Steel, because it is our last remaining blast furnaces in this country. And if you do want to make things like planes or whatever it is, or munitions, or have construction projects if you want to build great cities, then we need to have virgin steel. So therefore, I would argue it's in the national interest to keep it under public control.
Yeah.
Unless you can find a way that the private sector, which is a British private sector, can run that for profit and make that successful under the auspices of some arrangement with the government.
Yeah, but I would argue in the longer term, given the free market and commercial interests and companies are better at running things than the government, that what you do is you create the conditions, maybe with tax breaks and stuff, where companies from abroad or in Britain are interested in running the thing. So create the conditions whereby private enterprise wants to run it rather than let the government run it.
I mean, just in terms of the timing here, the Steel Industry Special Measures Bill cleared both houses in several hours. It was amazing to see Parliament leap into action. It received royal assent at, what, 6 p.m. last night?
Yeah, but how much of that was gesture politics? How much of that was theatre in order to make it look like the government was doing something? I would agree.
I would totally agree. But also it caught all the MPs off guard because many were out of the country. And in fact, I was talking to an MP yesterday who said that they were told, get on a plane, get back to the House because you have to vote.
Yeah, but on the other hand, it's completely understandable maybe their holiday should be interrupted because this is so important. And thousands of jobs are at stake. But to what extent are the public being deceived by the theatrical element of it without seeing that behind the scenes...
I don't think the public is deceived.
There's a long-term problem with the way things are run in this country.
But there's a lack of long-term planning, infrastructure, a long-term vision for this country. We talk about it the whole time. I was just looking at the energy companies. So British Gas, which is owned by Centrica, listed on the London Stock Exchange. E.ON is owned by a German multinational. EDF is French. OVO Energy is owned by Imagination Industries. Scottish Power is owned by the Spanish.
And major parts of the British car industry, like Rolls-Royce, a very British brand, is owned by a foreign company.
Yes.
As is Bentley, because you know I'm into classic cars.
You are.
So
yes.
That Bentley, a traditional, very British brand, is now also owned by a foreign company. So
and of course the other problem is that Donald Trump imposing 25% tariffs on steel. Again, this plays into this global economic uncertainty. And of course, this is a problem for Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor.
Yeah. Well, if we're going to be against tariffs, again, government intervening in the market, we agree tariffs are a bad idea. Then the government intervening by nationalisation is a little bit of a kind of two-faced approach, really, I think.
Well, I would agree with you as well. It's interesting, actually, when you read the detail of this, this is Jonathan Reynolds, who basically said that Ginjay had demanded hundreds of millions of pounds on top of the government's deal. So the government had tried to bribe them, I'll say bribe, 500 million quid to keep the furnaces open.
And maybe that's why the Chinese were interested in a failing thing in the first place.
Well
they saw a government inducement coming down the railroad.
Well, I think it was sold originally for £1, wasn't it? And then then the Chinese bought it. Now, which bright spark thought it was a great idea? I'll tell you what, we'll sell British Steel to a Chinese company. I mean, how was that ever allowed to go through?
Well, again, lack of joined-up thinking, but also people being in a bit of a crisis, looking for a short-term solution rather than thinking in the long term.
And then yesterday, there was a lot of drama yesterday. I don't know if you saw this, but apparently Jingjia executives turned up at the plant. They couldn't get through the automated barriers because their passes had been revoked. Then you had steel workers who were surrounding the steel plant to try and keep it open. So, I mean, you really had quite scenes being played out yesterday.
Yeah, but it's about a whole region being abandoned.
Of course.
Because it's not just the steel workers, it's the shops that stay open because of what the steel workers spend.
And a lot of jobs, 2,700 jobs at risk.
Yeah, probably more than that if we think about the whole economy being hit.
It is odd because in that parliamentary debate they finally realised there was an agreement that a Chinese firm should not have been allowed to buy the company. What? Liam Byrne, the Labour chair of the Business and Trade Committee, said at the heart of this debate is actually a very simple question. Can we entrust a critical national asset to a company that we do not trust? I say no, we cannot. Well, it's all a bit little too late.
But apparently if we lose steel, we'll be the only G7 country or economy that doesn't make steel. Yes. But why is making steel so difficult in this country? There's a deeper question to be asked. Why are they having such difficulty making it work?
Because our energy prices are so high, because of the madness of net zero being imposed. So this is what I mean about a lack of joined-up thinking. Now, very interestingly, Ed Miliband has spent more money on flights than his predecessor, far more. This is net zero Ed. And now Richard Tice is calling him Jet Ed because he spends so much money flying around the world preaching about net zero. Yeah. Where are the priorities for the British people where you say, actually, what we want is low energy costs, we need to keep inflation down, the food prices need to come down, you need to have security of steel. Can you tell I'm very angry about this?
Well, agitated, to say the least.
Yes. Need medicating urgently. But it is odd, and suddenly you're seeing all of this playing out. But there's a great article yesterday saying that government officials were waiting for the bill to receive royal assent. They were parked in a Premier Inn down the road.
What were they doing?
The government officials were waiting, apparently, to allow the law to take them control of the Chinese-owned company. I assume that the officials then go in and actually reclaim physical control of the plant.
But what happens to the Chinese owners? Do they get recompensed in some way?
That I don't know, to be quite honest. And, of course, there was huge pushback in terms of what went on yesterday. I think there are big questions for government here. I'm not sure. I think there was a level of theatrics which was played out by the Prime Minister and Jonathan Reynolds and all the rest of it.
Because he's desperate for good press.
Of course he is. And the Prime Minister then wrote on 10 Downing Street headed note papers saying, I have acted strongly in favour of British people and British workers. And I think the public can see through that.
Yeah, again, people kind of marking their own homework by saying, I did a really good job. Well, yes. What else would you say?
Yeah, I would agree. Also, let's just talk quickly, if we can, about this. This is a really shocking story, and actually, I'm so pleased you're here. This is the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. Jihadist attacks 3 jail guards. So this is Hashem Abedi. Counter-terrorism police are now investigating after one of the Islamist terrorists behind the Manchester Arena bombing attacked 3 prison officers with weapons and cooking oil in a high-security jail. This is Hashem Abedi. This was at HMP Frankland, and clearly this is a man who is serving life for 22 murders in the Manchester Arena bombing. The officers suffered burns and stab wounds. Abedi threw hot cooking oil over them before using makeshift weapons to stab the guards. This is according to the Prison Officers Association Union. One of the officers was stabbed in the face and throat, had to be airlifted for emergency surgery at the James Cook University Hospital in Middlesbrough. A second officer being treated in hospital. A third, a female officer, was released after treatment. There are so many questions I have about this. This man, who was part of the Manchester Arena attack in May 2017, killing 22 people, injuring 1,017, destroying the arena's foyer, and the deadliest act of terrorism and the first suicide bombing in the United Kingdom since the 7th of July 2005 London bombings. There are a lot of questions here about supervision, what he was doing, how he had cooking oil, how he had access to implements.
Well, this is obviously an extremely dangerous person. Now, I did forensic psychiatry for a while, which is psychiatry that specialises in dangerous people. And often you have to create very special units with very high levels of supervision to deal and contain extremely dangerous people. I've been in Broadmoor, for example.
Gosh.
So my question would be whether the prison service is really designed at the moment, because, again, it's pilot high, sell it cheap, for this kind of person, and whether, therefore, the prison officers are working in an environment, because it does take a very specialist environment to deal with extreme extremely dangerous people like this.
So is there an argument to say that the prison warders themselves are not trained to look after people? I mean, this man is clearly, he's not delusional, but he has very strongly held, fixated beliefs, doesn't he?
And also, I mean, the fact that he had access to the hot cooking oil, etc., etc.
Well, exactly.
You do need to be very thoughtful about dealing with extremely dangerous people who are plotting and scheming all the time in order to execute or perform dangerous acts. So that's why maybe you need hyper-specialist units that handle people like this, and maybe we don't have them because of the costs.
So there are lots of other questions here. He was being held in a separation unit. I don't even know what a separation unit is. I assume it is to keep people separate. But apparently this is designed for prisoners who pose a risk to staff and other inmates. There was also talk in some of the articles I read this morning about basically keeping him safe from other inmates.
But the training point that you raise is very interesting, because we've seen other stories, haven't we, where prison governors seem to get entangled with prisoners, etc., etc. Because what I've seen from my experience,
romantically?
Yeah. Is the training is necessary, because these people who you develop a relationship with inevitably, because you're seeing them on a daily basis, are plotting and scheming and are manipulative and are exploiting the development of that relationship to create trust, which they then exploit in this very, very dangerous manner.
I'll tell you what, let's talk more about that after the break. I just want to broaden this out. So he is serving, what, 55 years at His Majesty's pleasure. Is there any sense that someone like that can ever be rehabilitated?
Well, it depends what you're rehabilitating them from. If someone's got deeply held convictions and beliefs, and basically they very strongly believe these things, but they realise, because there's no blood test to check that someone's reformed, they realise they say certain things, and often you're dealing with, sorry to be direct, poorly trained social workers who are interviewing them and coming to a decision. They're very manipulative. They can manipulate parole boards and so on into thinking a reformation has occurred. So I think, again, you need specialists who can look through the manipulation to see whether someone really has reformed or not, because they know how to tap dance their way through the questionnaires and the kind of interviews they get.
So let me ask you a direct question, and I know what you're going to say, but in terms of people like this who have strongly held beliefs where you believe it's okay to kill innocent children, is there an argument to say that actually we should bring back the death penalty?
Well, no, I'm not going to be a big fan of the death penalty.
I know you're not.
For all sorts of reasons.
Not?
Because I don't believe that the state should kill people. And also, of course...
Even if that person kills children?
Well, I would say there's a famous argument, which is that you really have to be absolutely certain that you got the right person, etc.
I think we're pretty certain.
Yeah, in this case, yes. But in other cases, there have been miscarriages of justice where the wrong person got executed, particularly in the US. So I'm not a big fan of the idea that the death penalty is a great idea. I'm afraid the research evidence is it doesn't deter. It doesn't deter people like this. And punishment should deter criminals. And sometimes people who are suicidal and dangerous see it as a martyrdom thing.
I was about to say that.
So that's why it may not be such a great idea, I think, in that sense.
OK, let's throw that out, because I'll be very interested to see what you think at home this morning. That's the question I have for you this morning. Do you think it's actually time, in light of this, Hashem Abedi attacking 3 prison officers, also having the cooking oil available and the weapons and the implements and the way he's probably manipulated the system, is it time that actually this country reconsidered the death penalty?
But that's a separate argument. In other words, it's so dangerous to keep him, and it's dangerous for people looking after him, that maybe the death penalty is a better answer, because it's so dangerous for people.
Are you dancing on a coin there?
No, I'm just reflecting and thinking about what you said.
All right.
I'm able to change my mind.
You are able to change your mind. So is it time that we reconsider the death penalty in this country? 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. You can message us on X as well, at talkTV. You can also text the word talk in your message to 87222. In the interim, Raj and I will reconsider, we'll rethink our views on that, and we'll be back in a few short minutes. Good morning.
What we are debating today could have been dealt with at any time. The government surely knew that this was a crisis waiting to happen, and we could have debated this earlier in the week. We had Monday and Tuesday where we were sitting, where we simply had topical debates to talk about. So they could have raised this earlier. They've left it, why, till this weekend and recalling Parliament at great expense. When they knew this was coming down the line, why didn't they deal with it earlier?
Is it a bit like Pam in Gavin and Stacey? Does he just love the drama, or why is he doing it now, do you think?
Look, Peter, I just watched the very robotic, scripted speech that the Prime Minister's given on this topic. It seems to me like it's all planned.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk 6:26, Sunday, April the 13th. Sue, good morning to you, Sue. Oh, Dr. Raj, you look splendid, really dapper this morning. I wish more men dressed up. That's Sue. That's nice, isn't it?
Yes, that's very nice.
Good morning, David. We love your show and we watch it every week. Thank you, Eleanor Castleman. It made my day to see Dr. Raj. We love it when you two are together. You always make us laugh. Right from the get-go.
I'm just here to entertain you, David.
No, not only that. You're here to medicate me, to actually assess my psychological well-being.
It's a war. It's a war.
It is a war. It's a never-ending war. Tony, good morning to you. Tony Gannon. British people are being led by morons. This is interesting. David Thomas, before I asked that question, came back and said, is this not a suitable reason to reopen the death penalty conversation? So in the break, Raj, have you changed your mind again?
No, but I would say, going back to what we're discussing, the fact that these people are difficult to contain.
Yes.
And what tends to happen is actually my experience of being in forensic environments very similar to this, is that the prison warders, because these are celebrities, right? These guys. He's the Manchester Arena bomber, right? So over a period of time, a lot of prison officers actually want to be the ones that are dealing with him directly, because they kind of get a reflected celebrity. You know, in the pub afterwards, they can say, I'm the guy that's in charge of the Manchester Arena bomber, etc., etc. And these people can exploit the fact that in this very closed environment, it's inevitable that relationships develop. And these extremely dangerous people can manipulate you over a long period of time so that they get access to stuff and your guard is down. And therefore, one of the questions is, if it's so dangerous and lethal for people to be looking after them, should we protect those prison officers by bringing back the death penalty? Because it's just too dangerous to look after them.
I love the way you haven't answered my question. You're basically answering my question with another question.
Yeah, well, that's the art of psychiatry. Surely you know
that is
that
the art of psychiatry. But OK, so let's look at what Ian Aitchison, who's a former prison governor, who said. So he advised the government on extremism. He says this is a catastrophic security failure. They have failed to manage someone who is profoundly and manifestly a dangerous terrorist. They also goes on to say later in the article, this follows concerns about the prison leadership's ability to contain the threat from Islamist extremist inmates. So, if you've got this hotbed and you're hot housing all these people, which is essentially what you're saying, and there is a risk also of him influencing other people to become Islamic extremists, if when I get into government and I put you in charge of psychiatric well-being of the country and indeed the prison estate, what is the answer? So do we take these people out and put them in containment facilities or isolation units because they are deemed to be too dangerous, not only to other prisoners, but also to the prison workforce as well?
Well, I wonder whether what happens eventually is a group of people like this who are terrorists end up in the same place because we have got no money, and therefore we're saving money by putting them all in the same place, and they bond with each other again and radicalise each other, and therefore that becomes dangerous. So if you're not going to have the death penalty, if you're going to have an alternative, you have to throw money at the problem and maybe separate them so they have separate specialist units all around the country and they're kept away from each other. Because putting them together is like creating a university that teaches them, to some extent, extremism. And that's one of the reasons why extremism and criminal behaviour spreads. They say prisons are a breeding ground for criminality to some extent.
And
people learn about doing it
in many ways you have nothing else to do you? So you spend your time talking about ideology and exchanging ideas with other people and so on. So you can see how that happens.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, is it about
so
a
what's
lack
your
of
answer?
money? It's about a lack of money.
Right.
If you're going to not have the death penalty, you have to look after these people in the long term.
But we haven't got any
and
money.
think that through.
Apparently.
I know. Yes.
So therefore, does that add weight to bringing about the death penalty?
Well, I'd be interested in what prison officers think. I think the people who have to look after them, what do they think? I think that's an interesting question.
That's a really good question. Good morning, David. This is Keith in Oswald Street. I like the way Dr. Raj gives such balanced responses to your questions. On the question of...
Is that my mum again?
Yes, it is your mum. It's Keith. On the question of the death penalty, I think it should be introduced for those that murder children, kill first responders and murderous terrorists.
OK, but you know, actually, in the US, where obviously they have much more experience of it, some people want the death penalty, the ones who've committed the crime. They ask for it, actually, right? So that's also...
Because they then have notoriety in perpetuity.
Yeah. And some people think they commit the crime because they're going to get the death penalty. Do you see what I mean? So because they become notorious as a result. And also, they are suicidal. So be careful about that. The death penalty can become a motivating force for some very disturbed people. OK,
what about this one? Louise in Ipswich, good morning to you. David, these foreign terrorist prisoners should be deported to a jail in their country of origin. He was born in Britain.
OK, but also if you did that, they may just come back.
Well, exactly. And of course, he was actually born in this country. Now, interestingly, Nigel Farage said it is worth remembering the family came here as asylum seekers. That will hurt. That will sting this morning when people realise that. Also, Louise goes on to say, failing that, we should rent some jail space in El Salvador, the same as the Americans. Thoughts?
OK, so there's become an export industry.
Yeah.
And tariffs might get raised.
Tariffs may well.
But that's not a bad point, though, that maybe some other countries are better at containing them than we are, and maybe we should export them.
Maybe they're more draconian, and maybe there is actually then a disincentive to repeat offend. Well, not that you should be able to repeat offend if you're in prison for 55 years.
But that's very interesting. Some other countries may be better at this. So what about exporting our very difficult prisoners to other prisons abroad? Very interesting idea.
Well, there we are, Louise. Thank you very much for that. Deborah in Essex, good morning. David, the love of my life on screen. Good morning, Deborah. Wow. It's only 6:30. Good morning.
Has she taken her medication? What's wrong with her?
What is wrong with you? What is wrong with you, Deborah? Capital punishment. What would you behave this morning? Capital punishment. Well, usually I wouldn't have agreed. However, the crimes being committed of late are beyond comprehension. Southport is a prime example. I believe if a referendum on this was taken, it would be like Brexit. If the government can't stop and support this country, we need something that will. You need a deterrent.
And you think that... But the research evidence says the death penalty is not a deterrent, I'm afraid to say.
That's very interesting, actually. This one, no name to it. Yes, bring back the death penalty. These are subhuman individuals that need to be a raised deterrent or not. Does it deter other would-be terrorists to see people in jail, in isolation? Maybe we just need to toughen up. And in El Salvador, I can't imagine you get many perks and you're not able to watch the television like you are here.
Well, that would... I mean, I think that's a more interesting idea about whether that would be a deterrent, that you end up in a prison in El Salvador, I think. There's a real question about that.
Yeah,
but people have studied this again and again, and the death penalty does not tend to deter people from committing these crimes.
Sean in Gloucester, good morning. Good morning, David and Raj.
Detection rates deter people. That's another key point. How good are the police at detecting it? That's much more important.
The police have an unenviable task,
than
don't they?
How bad the punishment is if you get detected. That's the...
But how difficult is it to detect every terrorist cell? I mean, I actually think the police do a very good job on the whole. But imagine how many plots we don't know about that they've managed to foil.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But the evidence is, again, many times people have come through the system who are known with their famous examples, and they still end up planting a bomb or killing someone, even though the red flag has been raised again and again.
Good morning, David and Raj. I'm very torn about the death penalty, but there are undeniable cases where it is absolutely correct. Also, that vile Manchester Arena bomber is a prime candidate for deportation. But again, where? Why should we pay for his existence? Get rid of by any other method. We're far too soft on criminals. This is Darren, who's a market trader from Suffolk, my neck of the woods. Good morning. Hi, David. What you do to people like the terrorist is death penalty, capital letters, end of. You take someone's life, you get your life taken. Thank you. But what about the point, Darren, that Raj is making, which is actually what you're doing is rewarding their behaviour because they want to be a martyr. So you're only reinforcing the behaviour of people who are so entrenched in their views, which is essentially what you're saying is, I mean, there is a religious zeal to this, isn't there? That this is an entrenched view that you can't reason with these people.
But what's also interesting about all the old callers is that the evidence is the public tend to be in favour of the death penalty, massively so, and it's parliamentarians who are against it. So there's a mismatch. It's not a very democratic position.
And why is that?
Well, I don't know exactly why that is, but
why do you think it is?
Because the public are motivated for it for all sorts of reasons. But the parliamentarians will say the public are emotive; they're reacting emotionally to this situation, and they're not. The parliamentarians would say, I'm not saying I take the parliamentarian side. They're not looking at the evidence as to whether actually it detects criminals. They're not looking at the kind of things that lawyers would look at.
I also think as a parliamentarian you have to be dispassionate about it and look at it in terms of the law, how easy it is to apply that law and so on, whereas you're right that the public is seeing it as a knee-jerk response. And actually I feel very passionate that if you kill children you don't deserve to live, but then I understand the argument to say that actually all you're doing is actually making them a martyr.
But even though I'm not in favour of the death penalty, I do see it as a problem of democracy. If the public, generally speaking, vast swathes of the public, the majority of the public, again and again, according to the surveys, are in favour of the death penalty, it seems a bit odd that we don't have it if you're living in a democracy. Because generally speaking, the vast majority of parliamentarians are against it, but they're not reflecting public opinion.
And they're there to reflect the views of their constituents.
Well, many of them
their job.
Yeah, many of them don't think that's their job.
But it is their job. Maybe we need to educate the parliamentarians about what their job is.
No, they often think their job is to tell the public what to think.
But they're wrong, aren't they, Raj?
I'm just calling it like I see it. I'm just keeping it real.
Thank you for the moment. So there's the question this morning. Do you think it's actually time to reconsider the death penalty, or let's just flip that and do a Dr. Raj solution on this? Maybe we should then invest in offshore prisons, which are much tougher on these individuals, so it acts as a deterrent for those people who are thinking of committing these atrocious crimes. Let me know your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well, at talkTV. Lots to talk about this morning, by the way. After the break, I want to talk about this in the front page of the Daily Mail. This actually made my jaw drop open this morning. Bombshell email that could free Lucy Letby. We'll talk about that after the break. Also, Donald Trump rowing back on some of his tariffs. The Observer today says Rachel Reeves calls for global free trade fight back to protect the UK economy. Wait for this. Closer alignment with the EU. Here we go again. Good morning. This is Weekend Breakfast.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, 6:38. Dr. Raj and I having a little chat in the interim. Let's talk about this, because I know you and I both read this morning and just thought it was the most extraordinary article. The Daily Mail, it is actually the only paper, I think, that continues to talk about Lucy Letby. But let me just tell you what they're saying this morning. This is a special report, apparently. There is an explosive email, apparently, which appears to contradict prosecution claims that Lucy Letby was caught red-handed with a baby who subsequently died. This is a memo which was revealed yesterday. Apparently it's a significant boost to the nurse's legal fight to overturn her convictions. This is based around Dr. Ravi Jayaram. Now, he was the only medical witness at Letby's 2 trials who was able to point to behaviour directly linking her to baby's deaths, testifying This is the key. So he testified that she was standing over baby K's cot as the girl was deteriorating and that she did not call for help. However, according to the paper, there is an email which was sent on May the 4th, 2017, before she was investigated by the police, where Ravi Jayaram wrote, "At the time of deterioration, staff nurse Letby was at the incubator and called Dr. Jayaram to inform him of low saturations." That means low O2 saturations. Also in this email, it suggested that baby K's frailty was the cause of death, saying, Dr. Jayaram said, the baby subsequently deteriorated and eventually died, but events around this would fit with explainable events associated with extreme prematurity.
Yeah, well, this is an extraordinary bombshell because, remember, Lucy Letby, convicted of killing 7 babies, no one ever saw her actually do any of the things. It's all inferred, second-hand, as it were, from circumstantial evidence. So this guy, this doctor, is really important because he says, I arrived, the baby was deteriorating, and Lucy Letby was standing next to the baby doing nothing. OK, so this is the closest you get to an actual witness seeing Lucy Letby do something, as it were, to a baby. And it turns out now this message saying, A, she called for help, so it wasn't the case that she was standing around doing nothing, right? And so this version of events as presented by this email really is a bombshell moment. But as a psychiatrist, the thing that I found very weird about this case from the get-go is that you've got an extraordinary crime, right? A nurse kills 1 baby is an extraordinary crime, but kills 7, even more extraordinary. So the question to a psychiatrist is, where's the motivation? They never came up with an explanation for why this nurse would do this extraordinary thing, and that was very bizarre to
Was there never a talk about notoriety or trying to achieve fame?
Not as far as I could see, because it was one of the longest court cases in British legal history. And, I mean, they came up with a kind of motivation along the lines of that she had something going on in terms of a crush on another doctor, and maybe doctors arriving because of an emergency was her way of connecting with this doctor. But it was a very weird, in my opinion, definition of a motivation. There have been throughout the world, worldwide and throughout history, cases of doctors and nurses who have turned out to be serial killers, and the main motivation in that situation is called being a code blue junkie. Code blue is the American term for an emergency call-out. You've got a cardiac arrest on the unit, a pager emergency call-out goes, and the crash team arrives and jump up and down on the patient's chest and brings them back. So the code blue junkie is someone who gets off on this emergency situation and loves jumping up and down on people's chests. So they love it so much they start to generate the reasons. You know, they inject something into your potassium, into your drip feed, so that your heart stops, and then the emergency call-out team happens. But they never came up with that motivation in the Lucy Letby case. They never came up with any motivation. So it was kind of strange. You had this conviction this nurse was doing this incredibly bizarre behaviour, but no explanation as to why she'd be doing it. I find, as a psychiatrist, often involved in legal cases, that was very strange.
So when that verdict was given down, were you surprised with the verdict? Because
not only that, but the judge, in sentencing her and coming to the telling her that she was guilty, used a very technical word, sadist. He said, "You are a sadist," right?
And sadism, there is a definition to that.
Yeah, sadism has a very specific motivational, technical meaning, which is that you did it because you enjoyed inflicting death or suffering. I thought it was extraordinary. What the judge was actually trying to say is, we think you're a very bad person, but don't use sadist, which invokes a whole legal implication in terms of the motivation, when there was no evidence presented that the reason why she was doing it because she was getting off on it in some kind of emotional way. So again, that was really worrying, because it suggests that the whole legal process or court process was not thinking very logically or very technically about motivation. They just decided she was a really bad person, and that was it. That was the motivation. Very strange.
So it is very strange, and also it goes on to talk about the contradiction of the email in 2017. It talks about Jayaram's evidence that was given at that time.
So one of the other questions is, what's the alternative explanation? Let's just assume for the minute, for the purpose of conversation, that actually she's innocent, right? The alternative explanation is you've got a unit that's doing really badly. Babies are dropping dead, and rather than confront the fact, the management has to confront the fact.
They want to pin it on someone.
Yes, it's a scapegoating exercise, and that's terrible. If that was the case.
Pointed to in the trial, though, wasn't it?
Because it was a unit that wasn't doing very well.
It wasn't at all.
Yeah. So, you know.
Then also, if it says it's consistent with prematurity, or the rapid descent of the child was due to prematurity, you would see that. But also, that would then point to the idea that they don't know how to manage prematurity very well.
And this team of experts that her she's got new lawyers, the new defence team have produced a team of experts, worldwide experts in neonatology from all around the world, who've said that basically these babies were dying because they were really ill. That's the reason they were dying. And this is the bit
I find very interesting. So they have presented a 698-page report from 14 world-leading experts. Now, if you remember, at the end of that trial, there were lots of experts around the world saying something isn't right about this, and the evidence that was presented isn't enough to convict her, but there again, she was convicted of that crime. So they've brought together these 14 world-leading experts, and they've looked at this, and all of them have said the babies died from poor care, prematurity, and natural causes.
Yeah, and the other thing that happens in legal cases, and I've been involved in cases, you get a kind of arms race of who's got the best expert, right? So the qualifications are read out in great detail by the barrister saying, before I interview Professor so-and-so, can I just remind the court that you are, you know, the head of the Royal College, this, etc., etc. So the experts, without trying to be rude about the experts actually called, were not like worldwide recognized experts. Okay, they were competent doctors, right? But they were not world-leading authorities. Yet the legal defense team has now gone out and found a large number of people who really are widely recognized as being, you know, experts in a sense in which they are much more famous and known in the profession as being at the top of their game compared to the actual experts that are involved in the court case. And that's also very worrying, I think.
I would agree. And also, since the conviction, dozens of doctors, nurses, statisticians, law experts, scientists have come forward to criticise the way the evidence was presented to the jury, including Lord Sumption. If you remember, of course, he's a former judge at the Supreme Court. He said Letby is probably innocent. He added those questioning her convictions are too numerous and too well qualified to be dismissed as troublemakers.
Well, eminent statisticians have pointed to the fact that one of the main reasons she was convicted was this idea that she always seemed to be
on duty at the time of death of those babies.
Yeah, therefore they come up with a probability calculation that you'd have to win the national lottery sequentially. You know, the probabilities are so remote that she would be on call every single time a baby died. And the Royal Statistical Society has said that statistics is very dubious indeed as a reason to convict someone. So it's just the eminence of the people who are stepping forward is what I'm trying to say is very worrying.
So what happens now?
Well, the lawyer has said that it seems to be very difficult to get the case reviewed. But if it is the case that actually we may never know whether she's guilty or innocent, what we can know is the process by which she was convicted may have been very dodgy. What is that telling us about failing Britain, the failing legal system and the failing NHS? You know, we seem to be a society spiralling downwards in terms of competence.
I think the most interesting thing you said there is about apportionment of blame. So if you've got a failing NHS trust, and we hear this time and time again, then obviously that is reflected in their rankings and in terms of their peer review and all the rest of it. And of course the managers of that would be very keen to find a reason that isn't reflective of the environment and work conditions of that hospital.
Well, we've got this thing, and I'm going to get myself into trouble now, called the CQC, the Care Quality Commission, and it's very doubtful, because I mean when West Streeting came in, he said they're not fit for purpose, but they're meant to be the main regulator that checks on the quality of healthcare. And there's a lot of questions about the way they inspect hospitals as to whether they actually know what they're doing or capable or competent to do that well. And that's crucial to keeping standards high in the NHS.
It is. Wow. That's an extraordinary report, isn't it? Raj, thank you for the moment. Crikey. After the break, I want to talk about Donald Trump and the tariffs. So the latest news here is Trump's administration has now exempted smartphones and computers from reciprocal tariffs, including the 125% levies imposed on Chinese imports. I want to talk about that. Rachel Reeves, also in The Observer today. Rachel Reeves calls for a global free trade fight back to protect the UK economy. We'll talk about that as well. Also, Hashim Abedi. And given what we now know, is it time to reconsider the death penalty in this country? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning. opened the window for ethnic minorities to apply to join the police. They then had a shorter window for white candidates to join. They then said that they would accept the best candidate from those applicants. But now this Chief Constable has gone further, saying that he wants the law changed so that you can discriminate against white people.
I think his language is very clumsy. It is not unusual for any organisation, whether that's a police force or any commercial organisation, to look at certain times about recruiting certain skill sets, certain types of candidates into their organisation.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Many messages coming in. Good morning, David and Raj. Maybe we could use a lie detector on Lucy Letby. I realise that legally they don't count. However, a pass, spend more on the case. Fail, let the whole thing rest. Love you two together. That's very kind.
Lie detection tests, I'm afraid, are very controversial.
It just
in the field of
makes me
psychology
think of
and
Jerry
psychiatry.
Springer.
Yeah, well, the evidence is they're not very reliable. They're not very accurate. And they can be gamed. The system can be gamed by people who know how they work.
What do they look for?
Well,
Sweating?
They're looking for the fact that if you're telling a lie, you're more emotionally aroused, and therefore certain things happen, like
blood pressure.
your blood pressure changes, your pulse rate
Pupils?
changes,
Do they look at that?
and also your sweat rate changes. The trouble is that you can game the system, so you can learn how to get your way through a lie detection test by, for example, they ask you neutral questions, then they ask you questions like, where were you on the night of July the 9th, and the comparison between the two. But you can game that system. You can train yourself, for example, to be emotionally flat when being asked a danger question, and to be emotionally aroused when being asked a neutral question, etc., etc. So there are all sorts of problems with lie detection tests, I'm afraid to say.
Mark in Selby, good morning to you. Good morning, doctors. It doesn't matter what the public today wants, such as a national inquiry into the rape gangs. The public gets what the public tells them they want. That is not governance. It causes anger. I think you mean the public isn't getting what it wants. Also, does Raj know that Wimbledon does not start until June? He seems to have been attired himself rather too early. Love the show. It's a very good point. I shall let him know. Keep all of those messages.
It's rowing. It's a rowing.
It is a rowing. Are you going to the boat race?
No, not at the moment. Unless someone wants to offer me a ticket.
Oh yes, that's very good. VIP hospitality would be very nice on one of the bridges. Right, let's talk about this because let's talk about the economy. US President Donald Trump. I'm really keen to get your psychological insight into Donald Trump. We'll be here for weeks. His administration have exempted smartphones and computers from reciprocal tariffs, including the 125% levies imposed on Chinese imports. So this is something of a volte-face, and I think the worry was about the cost of these electronic goods going into the United States. I think Apple said, well, it's going to basically triple the cost of our iPhones going into the United States. Donald Trump... I don't know what you think of Donald Trump, but look, he is a businessman. Someone said to me the other day, he is playing 2D chess on a 3D chessboard. And I think there's a lot of truth in that.
Well, he sold himself to the electorate as I'm this great deal maker. I wrote The Art of the Deal. I'm a successful businessman.
He didn't actually write it, I don't think.
Well,
allegedly.
Okay. Yeah, allegedly wrote it. Anyway, so he says, listen, I'm this great deal maker. You need someone who actually has been out in the real world and makes deals, okay? So the thing is, though, being a property developer, which is kind of where he cut his teeth, is a whole nother thing to deal making in terms of governments. So one of the things that people in the commercial world can do is they can do a deal where they shaft you and they move on and do a deal with someone else. There's no long-term enduring relationship in that kind of situation where you're doing a deal again and again and again with the same person, right?
And building trust.
Thank you. So countries, on the other hand, are doing deals with each other that last thousands of years. We're going to continue trading with each other. So one of the issues is he bringing a technique which works in a commercial world because you can shaft people there and move on because you're not going to deal with that person ever again, probably. Well, that doesn't really work in the world of international relations. And the second point I've got to make is the flip-flopping doesn't make any sense in terms of negotiating. I mean, if you went to a guy selling you a car and on day one he says the car is £20,000, then you go the next day, it's £10,000, then it's £30,000. It keeps moving day after day. Yeah. After a while, you're going to go, I tell you what.
I'll have a different car.
I tell you what, I don't really believe him when he tells me this is the price. I'll hang in here and wait and wait and wait till he changes his mind. So the whole flip-flopping thing makes no sense in terms of deal-making and the psychology of deal-making. And that is very, very worrying that Trump doesn't seem to see that. Now, the final point I want to make is all the tech bros, the billionaires who were behind him in the inauguration and turned up, right, who all supported him. And Trump complains that all these jobs, American jobs, are going overseas. You know why they went overseas? Because Apple and all these big companies sent the jobs overseas. That's how all those people standing behind him became billionaires. They outsourced American jobs abroad, right? So there's something very ironic about him being supported by those people, him blaming China for taking the jobs when it was American companies that sent the jobs abroad. And that's how they made all that money.
And also in terms of Trump, do you think there is an element of delusion? Because he is trying to convince himself that what he is doing is right. He keeps saying it's going to be, oh my God, it's going to be a great idea. And, you know, as he slaps on more and more tariffs, but also what he's done, and let's go back to the trust word, is that he has undermined trust with his greatest allies and partners like the United Kingdom. We have no idea where we stand anymore. In many ways, we should be pleased we got away with 10%. The EU not so happy at 20%, even though that obviously is on pause for 90 days. But it also says something about that relationship. What I'm worried about is it makes the UK government think, hang on a minute, the US isn't actually a worthy ally, and we now need to look towards Europe again.
Well, what he doesn't seem to realise, again, is the rest of the world tends to have other options. They'll start trading with each other and sort of, you know, keep America out of the cold. So the other problem about the let's make America great again is the delusional idea America is intrinsically great. It's not intrinsically great. It's great if it does great things. And if it produces iPhones cheaper than China, brilliant. But if you can't do that, then be careful about just banging the drum saying, we're a great country. Why are you a great country is the question. What is it that you do that makes you great? And that is what's worrying about him.
And of course, America is based on freedom of thought and liberty and
competition.
And
he's destroying
free market.
Yeah.
And actually, Gordon Brown said the world is being brought to its knees by one economy. Outside that economy lives 96% of the population who produce 84% of the world's manufactured goods. Now, Trump's view of America is the centrepiece of the entire world, and that is not true.
But the other very dangerous thing that Trump doesn't realise, because maybe it's a bit like having an estate agent running your country, maybe he doesn't realise something, which is the very dangerous thing about China and this trade war, right, is that China begins to think, well, how do we deal with this person? Maybe we'll take Taiwan. Right? Because that's one way of getting him to see that maybe this tariff war doesn't work. Is he creating the conditions where he makes taking Taiwan by China more likely as a result of this trade war?
I mean, also just hitting China with 145... I mean, it is almost delusional, isn't it? That you accelerate the tariffs to 145% and what China hit back with 125% and said, we're not playing your game anymore.
Yeah. And one of the questions is he looking for some kind of quick turnaround where he thought the Chinese would fold and therefore he would get an electoral boost from that? And that doesn't seem to be happening at all.
It is extraordinary. The whole thing is
But is it dangerous because it's now beyond the art of the deal? It's into the world of really making war and taking countries more likely. And has he thought that through? Maybe.
No, he hasn't.
Well, hang on a second. Maybe he goes, I'll create the conditions whereby China takes Taiwan. That means I can then take Greenland, for example. You see it? Then there's a mopping up of all the little sort of countries around the world from China and America. There's a race to take over other countries. Maybe that's where we're headed. But it is worrying.
Maybe he isn't as stupid as we think. Raj, thank you for the moment. Keep all those messages coming in. Michelle in Altrincham. Good morning, David and Raj. I love watching you both on Talk Weekend. Thank you, that's very kind. You brighten up my mornings. It's like free therapy. You should try sitting here. So thank you for that. I also agree with the death
I pay a price. If you don't mind me saying
I'm paying you.
I pay a price to be here. Anyway.
Do you?
Yeah.
How much is that?
Stress.
I see.
Stress.
Right, seriously. Also, also, I agree with the death penalty. In my view, once someone is gone, they're forgotten. No ongoing cost to the taxpayer and no chance of being released to commit further crimes. Thank you. Great show. Keep all those messages coming in this morning, please. I'm just asking, in light of Abedi and what has happened in the prison, do you think it is time now to reconsider whether we bring back the death penalty into this country? Really keen to get your ideas and thoughts on that this morning. The number 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well at talkTV. After the break, we're going to talk about other stories making the news this morning. I'll go through all of this morning's front pages as well. I'll make sure I don't forget this morning, which is what I did yesterday. I completely forgot. Well, to go through all of this morning's front pages and deal with all the big stories this morning. Don't go anywhere. This is Weekend Breakfast.
We've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino?
Right? Yeah, okay. Rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich, don't dirty minds, away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, Christ, get hell," before driving off. And so I just said it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. As an Aussie that has been dive-bombed by our version of the magpie, which is much bigger, every springtime, the folk in this village...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good morning to you. Just after 7 o'clock now on Sunday, April the 13th. I'm David Bull, and this is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning. Great news. Great news, as you would expect. It's International Plant Appreciation Day. That's right. It's a perfect day, actually, to bring home a new house plant and also to pamper those that you already have in your fine homes. Now, did you know that plants like it when you talk to them? Also, they love classical music, apparently. The London Eurovision party today. This is where current and former contestants showcase their songs in front of fans and international media. Now, I can tell you that actually it's come round again. Terry Wogan said that actually Eurovision seems to come round every 6 weeks, and I kind of agree. Eurovision begins in exactly 1 month on the 13th of May in Basel, in Switzerland. Happy Eurovision Day.
Like a puppet on the string.
And also today, it's International Scrabble Day, a day that celebrates the popular board game. The day was actually picked in honour of the creator. His name was Alfred Mosher, but he was born on this very day, so happy International Scrabble Day.
I need a D. I need a G. My baby is a wizard playing Scrabble. Compared to where he is, I merely dabble. Oh, how I want to defeat him now. Might seem like pie in the sky, but
There
I'm
you go.
gonna try.
International Scrabble Day. Right, let's move on and start today's show, shall we?
Today's fascinating facts.
So this sounds fascinating facts. On this day in 1732 was the birth of Frederick North. He was the second Earl of Guildford. Now, as Lord North, this will become apparent in a minute, as Lord North, he levied the tax on tea that incensed our little American colonialist friends, and it provoked the so-called Boston Tea Party. On this day in 1829, the British Parliament passed the Catholic Emancipation Act, lifting restrictions imposed on Catholics at the time of Henry VIII. And on this day in 1892, it was the birth of Sir Arthur Travers Harris. He was the Royal Air Force bomber commander, nicknamed Bomber Harris by the press. He was often within the RAF called Butcher Harris. He instituted the mass bombing raids over Germany, including the controversial blanket bombing of Dresden. And those are this hour's fascinating facts.
Weekend breakfast, yeah, it's all about the fun. With David and Raj, the day's just begun. The weekend breakfast team, we found our home.
Good morning, 5 minutes past 7 on Sunday, April the 13th. I'm joined this morning by everyone's favourite psychiatrist, and you need to have a favourite psychiatrist, Dr. Raj Prostate. Good morning.
Good morning. I think we should play, you mentioned Scrabble. We
Yes.
should play medical Scrabble. We're only allowed to use medical words.
Oh, that's good.
Because I think polyp is one of your favourite words. What?
Yes, if you esophagus, that's always good. But then, do you spell it with an O, or do you do the American version and do an E?
Well, because apparently when you go to medical school, you learn something like, I don't know, 7,000 new
Do you?
words, apparently. Yeah.
Yes, I think
If you're
I'll-
passing, that is.
Well, I did pass. Our lexicons are quite good, I think.
Yeah.
A lexicon is your vocabulary. Did you go to medical school?
Thanks for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hard to believe, I know.
It is hard to believe. What's your favourite medical term, word?
I don't know. Bill?
I quite like... What about borborygmi?
Oh, my God.
That's a good one, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Come
That's
on, you'll go.
the funny sounds that your bowels make.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
It's very close to my heart. what have you got? Come
Wow,
on.
I'm very impressed
Yes,
with
thanks,
that.
thanks. Come on, you'll go.
I can't
15,
compete.
love.
Yeah, I know, you're right. I can't compete. I'm
Can't
sorry.
you?
No. The only thing I can think of, I'm trying to think of some kind of obscure
Come on, then.
psychiatric term. Folie à deux, which is kind of what we are.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, that was in the
I'm trying-
Batman movie.
What?
Folie à deux was the subtitle of the
Was it?
Batman latest, not Batman, the latest Joker movie.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of another one now.
Okay.
I'll come back to
You're
you.
so competitive.
Hemicolectomy is quite good.
Oh, my God.
Sorry, we'll go. Good morning. Yes, do not adjust your TVs. Dr. Raj Prostate joins me this morning, consultant psychiatrist and broadcaster. He's just lost medical Scrabble.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
Badly.
If you're just joining us, let's tell you what is going on this morning. This is the Sunday Times front page. The Navy is now on alert to escort the fuel in the steel crisis. So yesterday, Parliament recalled it was very dramatic, actually, the scene. So we saw the legislation, the speeches in the House of Commons. Then it was referred to the House of Lords. It got royal assent at 6 o'clock last night. That is really rapid. But also, there are lots of questions here about what did the government know? What did the business secretary know? How did he only just realise that actually they need to recall Parliament at a time when they'd all gone on Easter recess? And then when you talk to members of Parliament, they were told to get back from holiday, to book any flight, that in fact their families would be paid to get back to this country so they could have that vote. Well, here's the deal, which is actually, it looks like that Jinjay, the company that the Chinese company that owns that plant, hadn't ordered any more fuel for the plant, and so therefore the government has to step in. So the story this morning is ministers could send the Royal Navy to escort a fuel shipment to Scunthorpe's blast furnaces after Parliament voted to seize control. So They want to make sure the cargo actually reaches the UK without being intercepted or redirected. The location of that cargo hasn't been confirmed. We believe it's coking coal, which is vital to keep the furnaces running. And this, and I know a lot about this now, this is about making sure that we have a steel-making plant that makes virgin steel. And if we don't, we'd be the only country in the G7 that is unable to do that. Apparently, Jonathan Reynolds told Parliament that Jinjay had demanded hundreds of millions of pounds on top of the government's deal, but without any conditions to stop the company transferring funds to China. That's the big story this morning in the Sunday
So the
Times.
government and Sir Keir Starmer are trying to sell it about the fact that this theatrical thing was about us being responsible.
Correct.
But actually, does it actually really look more like chaos?
It's complete chaos.
And an emergency, chaotic situation that recalled parliamentarians when, if they'd been keeping an eye on the situation, it wouldn't have had to happen in this way. So it looks more chaos than actual responsibility.
So according to the copy, it dawned on... Hang on a minute. This is really interesting, the wording. It dawned on Reynolds on Thursday that the Chinese company was never going to accept the offer. Well, where were you?
Yeah,
That's your job.
This is a situation that's been growing for months, basically.
It has. Yes. And so the government have been trying to come to some sort of deal with Jinjay to keep the furnaces going. But it was clear that, according to this copy as well, that actually Jinjay was trying to sell off the raw materials because they had no intention of keeping the blast furnaces operating at all. He told Parliament yesterday that Jinjay had demanded hundreds of millions of pounds on top of the government's deal, but obviously there was no commitment not to send that money back to China. Also, he said that Jinjay had no intention of purchasing the raw materials. And, of course, as I said, that if the furnaces had closed down, it would cost too much money to bring them back. And then, not only that, the chaotic scenes we talked about, that early yesterday, the executives of Jinjay then arrived at the plant, tried to use their passes. They'd been blocked, so they couldn't gain access. Then you had angry steel workers who were surrounding the cars, stopping the Chinese executives from getting into that steel plant. And, of course, as you say, abject chaos breaks out. So, but it's being spun, and Starmer is spinning it to say, I'm in control, I'm backing British steel.
So if it's government by chaos, which is what it looks like, then if you're in Parliament, don't book an overseas holiday.
Ever.
Stay within 10 miles of Parliament, because you may get called back.
But of course, this was the first time it's been recalled on a Saturday since the Falklands.
Yeah.
It is very rare, 34 times, I think.
Which usually means there has been a bit of forward planning before, but now, no, it looks like.
And the psychology of this, do you think the government did it? And you don't know, but we're just supposing. Did the government do it to have maximum impact, the theatricals or the theatricality of recalling Parliament looking like you are reacting, that you are putting British interests first? If they tabled it, and I was talking to an MP yesterday, if they tabled it at the end of last week, it would have had a different kind of feeling, I think, from the members of Parliament and the public.
Well, trying to read further into it from a psychiatric standpoint, you're right about the element, the public relations element, which is that we're trying to look like we're responsible and doing something. But what's really worrying is to what extent is this government actually able to do anything? They talk about growth, for example. No evidence they're doing anything about growth. So the only thing they seem to be able to do something about is recall Parliament, right? So their energy is in an area of action where they can perform certain actions, but it actually highlights something. They can't seem to perform actions elsewhere in terms of stuff that actually will make a difference to the country. They seem to have no ideas, basically.
Are you saying politicians don't have ideas?
Their only idea is we'll just recall parliamentarians.
Yes, and see what they think.
Because we can control that. In other words, it shows what they can't control.
But also, in terms of optics, no parliamentarian would vote against British Steel, would they?
But also, they all had to come back, because it would look really bad if they didn't.
Yes.
Right? So that was the way the government had of exercising power. So the only way of exercising power is the way Parliament runs. They can't seem to exercise power in terms of changing our country, which is what we need.
We desperately need it. Let's talk about this also, if you are just waking up. We did speak about it earlier an hour ago, but the Sunday Telegraph, jihadist attacks 3 jail guards. This is unbelievable, actually. This is Hashem Karim Abedi in HMP Frankland in Durham. So he attacked 3 prison officers with weapons and cooking oil in a high-security jail. He's serving life for 22 murders in that Manchester Arena bombing. Just absolutely shocking. So the officers suffered burns and stab wounds. He threw hot cooking oil over them and then used homemade weapons to stab the guards. You and I talked about this earlier, but just in terms of that, there are lots of questions. How on earth is this man allowed cooking oil? How is he in a kitchen? How does he have homemade weapons? Why isn't he in solitary isolation? So many questions here about just the incompetence of the forces or of the people running that particular prison.
But also reading between the lines, 3 officers attacked.
Yes.
It sounds, if you read between the lines, the attack went on for a period of time.
Yes.
How come it went on for so long? In other words, how come there was no emergency backup that would arrive, a crash team that would arrive and snuff out an attack like that? It just seemed to have gone on for a very long time, reading between the lines in terms of the fact 3 different officers are injured. And he had different weapons, etc., etc.
And it says here, Ian Aitchison, a former prison governor who advised the government on extremism in jail, said this is a catastrophic security failure. It will be a resignation issue. They have failed to manage someone who is profoundly and manifestly a dangerous terrorist. He went further to say he'd actually done a report, and his recommendations to ministers was to have an independent advisor on counter-terrorism in prisons. And also the worry is about radicalisation of other prisoners to become Islamic fanatics, but also the fact is he's allowed to continue in his ideology at His Majesty's pleasure.
But as a psychiatrist involved often in forensic contexts where people very dangerous are being detained, there's a risk assessment that's going on a daily basis. Something went very wrong.
On a daily basis?
Something went with very dangerous people. Something went very wrong with the risk assessment here because he was allowed access to stuff that turned out to be very dangerous. So there was a failure at the risk assessment level, I think.
I would agree. We also spoke about this bombshell email. This is the front page of the Mail this morning, the bombshell email that could free Lucy Letby. This is about the evidence given by Ravi Jayaram, and of course you and I said that if this is true, and if the evidence that was given to court isn't the whole truth, and the conviction was based on flawed evidence, that is pretty jaw-dropping.
Also, it's jaw-dropping maybe the scale of the incompetency of that unit that led to this situation. We now discover the door swipe data on which they based the evidence that Lucy Letby was always there when her baby died was very dodgy, apparently. I mean, that was crucial to the case as well. So many things are turning up which indicate that the court case, one of the longest court cases in British legal history, seemed to have been handled in a very incompetent manner, it sounds like.
Well, absolutely. Should we take you through the rest of this morning's front pages, actually? So that is the Sunday Times and the Sunday Telegraph that I've actually done already, and the Mail. Also, the Mail this morning on the right-hand column says MPs seize back British steels from the Chinese on a historic day. Moving on to the Observer. The Observer says Reeves calls for global free trade fight back to protect the UK economy. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, today set the case for far-reaching changes to global trade and economic agreements. She admits that Donald Trump's tariffs will have a profound effect on the United Kingdom, and that what is needed is world economics that require a strong international response. She says she is under no illusion about the difficulties that lie ahead. She says she's going to make clear at a meeting of the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, this month for a new, more balanced global economic and trading system that recognises the benefits of free trade over the kind of nakedly protectionist strategies employed by Donald Trump in recent weeks. She also says her aim is to achieve an ambitious new relationship with the EU, as well as a trade deal with India. I wouldn't bet my bottom dollar on that. The Sunday Express. This is rather good. Dream on is the headline in the Sunday Express. Camilla had to laugh when she was asked if the King might take it easy. There's a brilliant picture, actually. She looks fantastic here, and the King. And I rather like the royal cipher on the right-hand side there of the plane. And the Union... I love that. I actually think the juxtaposition of the Union flag and the royal cipher there, I'm all in favour. Anyway, the Queen says the King is driven by helping others, so there is no chance of him reducing his workload despite his ongoing cancel battle. During their state visit to Italy last week, Camilla was asked if her husband would be taking it a little easier after his recent hospital admission, and she jokingly replied, dream on. That's the front page.
But as someone who's dealt with
Express.
people suffering from cancer, actually being busy and having is good for you. You know, having a direction in your life and being something to do every day and be engaged stops you worrying about yourself. So actually, it's therapeutic. Actually,
yeah, because otherwise you become entrenched in your own morbidity, don't you? And you keep thinking, what if, what happens now, what happens next? So obviously it would help.
Yeah, but also physiologically it's better for the body to be active and for you to be out doing stuff. It's better for your body in general in terms of mounting an immune response to cancer.
I think also it sends really interesting sort of signals to other people who are suffering from a diagnosis of cancer or dealing with their own cancer journey, that they can see the king is affected by cancer and getting on with it.
But also people who are suffering from cancer don't like often being the way everyone changes their view of them.
Yes, quite.
Think of them as disabled in some sense, when actually they're not disabled.
Not at all.
They've got this thing, it's receiving treatment. They should proceed to lead a full and active life as possible.
So the one thing that I always struggle with is when people say, oh, he's got cancer, she's got cancer, and of course, as we know, it's not this this kind of, you can't lump everything together. Each of them is very discrete. They're all very different cancers. And I always say to people, well, what type of cancer is it? And often you can't get an answer to that.
Yeah, but it's a big taboo, isn't it? People get nervous about talking about it. But actually, it's a very good question, because it's a very different thing.
And the outcomes and prognoses are different based on those cancers. This is the front page of the Mirror as well. Another beautiful picture there of the King and Queen. Camilla, no one can get Charles to slow down. And
sounds like she's tried, but failed.
I think she probably has tried, actually. The front page of the Mirror as well. MPs vote to protect works. Ring of Steel is the headline in the Mirror this morning.
Do you think that in going to the press and saying no one can get Charles to slow down, she's begging for someone out there to get him to slow down?
Yes.
Is there a subtext?
Right.
Is there a message here behind the scenes? Please, someone, get him to slow down.
I think she's pretty hard worker, isn't she, as well?
Yeah, I agree.
They both look very good on that. The Sun on Sunday front page. Wow, what do you make of this, Raj? BBC Fury at backstage film. Strictly sex toy video. Turnover. Strictly stars Jamie Borthwick and Wyn Evans. It's always Wyn Evans, isn't it? We're wrapped by BBC bosses after a shocking sex toy video. Footage of EastEnder Jamie, 30, brandishing the explicit gadget during the show's tour was shared online. The pair were reprimanded after execs became aware of the images. Wyn, 53, was later axed over a sexual comment.
And it says, see the shocking video at, and there's a web link.
Where does it say that?
Calm down, on page 4.
Oh, here we are.
It's something to do with the Sun. See the shocking video at. I love that. So they tease you up, right? So they go, this is an outrage, but you can look at it here.
But it's our outrage.
Yeah, exactly.
So there we are. That's and there are many pages of this, 4, 5, and so on. And then there's a picture. Who's this? Katia Jones is, I believe, here. She's hoping to net new fans whilst denying she ever had a problem with celebrity partner Wyn Evans. See?
And she says Wyn has never made me feel uncomfortable in any way.
But she's dressed in a very sparkly way. There you go. There's some reading for this weekend. Right, and then the Daily Star. Let's find that one. Oh, Downton Abbey. Did you like that? Acting legend Maggie Downton Abbey. Acting legend Maggie Smith's spirit is present on the movie set, says the Star. The spirit of the late great Dame Maggie Smith was felt by stars on the latest Downton Abbey film, says actor Paul Giamatti. He said she remained a force in a spiritual way on set of the production.
Well, yeah, I don't know what to say about this story. He did, of course, star in a very famous film, Sideways, which is all about drinking very heavily. I'm just going to put it out there.
OK. Right, there we go. I want to read that now. So there you go. Downton Abbey. That's the front page of the Daily Star. That brings us to the end of the front pages this morning. Lots of messages, Raj.
Uh-oh.
Good morning, this is Rob. Good morning, David and Raj, also known as the Chuckle Brothers. The High Court decision... I actually worked with the Chuckle Brothers years ago.
OK.
Yeah, to me, to you. You've no idea what I'm talking about, have you? The High Court decision to stop the Woodhouse colliery opening has to be reversed. We need the coking coal the mine would produce to keep our steel furnaces running and not rely on imports. I would agree. Jane says, just very simply, what a joy, David and Raj. That's nice.
Very nice.
Very nice. Keep all those messages coming in. On a very serious note also, I'm asking this morning, is it time to reconsider the death penalty in this country? The number 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also message us on X as well at talkTV. Now, after the break, I want to talk about a number of things. Firstly, the ongoing bin crisis, which is occurring in Birmingham. Also, another story about Birmingham, which I saw in The Spectator, and I want Raj's opinion on this, how Birmingham actually became the epicentre of Britain's opioid crisis and the real problems that are going on in full daylight, actually. And also, just staying with the subject of Birmingham, the union boss who is actually spearheading the Birmingham crisis, wait for this, had her rubbish collected because she doesn't live in the area which is affected by the bin strikes. You can't make any of this up. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
Not going, oh, is anybody watching? I'll just nick 3 bottles of Coca-Cola and a sandwich. They're just walking in and taking it.
Yeah, well, once upon a time, in order to be a successful thief, you had to employ a certain degree of guile. Now you don't need to do that at all. It's an easy choice. Career-wise, it's fairly risk-free.
Yeah.
Because store detectives aren't going to do anything about it. Most members of the public are rightly not going to do anything about it. And unfortunately, the police are too busy on their diversity training courses or checking their white privilege to do anything about it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Back 7:26 on Sunday, April the 13th. I'm joined by Dr. Raj Basode, everyone's favourite psychiatrist this morning. You two are great, says Sophia. I love you both. Happy Sunday. Thank you very much. This is from Alan in Merseyside. Sunak ran the country through various emergencies. Starmer gets one emergency and all panic starts. He is not a leader. And this one from Keith in Oswestry. Tommy Robinson is in solitary confinement for a civil offence. So why isn't the arena bomber kept the same way? Keep those messages coming in. I'm also asking, just tell me your thoughts on the death penalty. I'm sort of changing my mind on this. Is there a reason now, given what we've seen with Abedi and what is going on in that prison, should we start looking at the death penalty again? Is it now time to reopen that debate about bringing back the death penalty into this country? The number 0344 499 1000. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. Let's talk about some of the other stories that are making the headlines this morning. Birmingham, the bin crisis. I mean, just from a medical point of view, it is a massive problem in terms of the rats that we've heard about, the size of the rats. It's a massive public health emergency as well.
Definitely. And, you know, rat spreads disease, etc., etc. But what is the end point of this thing? Because the bins are piling up, and I don't understand where it's going to end. Because it's getting worse and worse. It's looking like a third world country, basically.
It is.
Bits of Birmingham at the moment.
It is. Well, wait for this, because this is going to make people very cross. A union boss who is directing the bin strikes had her rubbish collected whilst mountains of rotting waste piles up on the streets, which she is encouraging. This is Anne-Marie Kild-Klein, lives 50 miles, that's why, Raj, 50 miles from the industrial action. She's spearheading in Birmingham, and of course she's all right, Jack, because she's got her bins collected.
All right, Jack is a famous line from a 50s movie about the excess power of the unions in Britain.
That's why I used it. Very clever.
Just what I explained to the public.
Very good, very good. I mean, it just seems very unfair. It's like one rule for one lot and then one rule for the others. I know she isn't affected because she's not in the catchment area, but nevertheless, it does kind of reinforce the two-tier Britain that you've got union bosses who are getting fatter and fatter, who sees a weak Labour government, who are giving in to the unions, and of course they're using their political power and muscle to basically wreak misery on normal people living in Birmingham.
But also from a public relations standpoint, obviously it's not good for her that this story is broken. But, you know, she ought to have thought that through in terms of it was sooner or later going to come out that her bins are being cleared and everyone else's aren't. So, you know, she should have gone and stayed with a friend in the affected area.
Immediately. Let's just talk about this. I read this article in The Spectator in the week, and I thought it was really interesting. And then when I saw that you were on today, I thought I'd bring it up with you. This is about Birmingham becoming the epicentre of Britain's opioid crisis. So, obviously, we're talking about the bin crisis there, but there is a much bigger crisis going on. In the 2023, and the City Council effectively declared itself bankrupt, the city's poorer districts saw an influx of nitazines. These are new synthetic opioids, which are 40 times stronger than fentanyl and up to 500 times stronger than heroin, which it is often mixed with. What is interesting about this is just the sheer number of overdoses and how many of those overdoses aren't reported. And I don't think we really understand the true scale of the deprivation leading people to take these drugs, have no idea what's in the drugs, and then obviously killing a lot of people.
And the terrible thing about this kind of drug cycle is that people get addicted to the drugs because of deprivation, and then having got addicted, they've got to commit crime to get the money to pay for the stuff. So it becomes a really bad, vicious cycle. On a separate point, there's a lot of thinking now amongst economists that the whole drug economy, which is below, obviously, the surface and doesn't get reported officially, means that our understanding of what the gross domestic product is, this GDP, this big number that we pay a lot of attention to, is way off, because a lot of things that aren't measured, like the drug world, sex workers, etc., etc., massive parts of the economy, they never turn up in the official figures. How can you run a country when you don't actually know what's going on in it?
And also, so the article goes on to say, unlike the United States, we lack an overdose tracking dashboard. So the statistics are widely considered to be a complete underestimate in terms of the numbers of nitazine-related deaths. So they reckon that since June 2023, 400 nitazine-related deaths. There's another point here, which is that actually the police have stopped carrying naloxone, which reverses the opioids. Now, there are lots of questions about that. Why have the police stopped carrying naloxone? Because actually, if you, as you know, if you give naloxone urgently and quickly, then you reverse the effects of the opioids and you can stop people dying.
Yeah, it's a very important point. But the other thing is, there's this famous thing to do with coroners. Coroners are very important people, because when people die, they issue this thing called a preventable death notice, which is very, very important. And we've seen again and again coroners issuing this stuff, and they're just getting ignored. I mean, as a psychiatrist with an interest in mental health, there are many mental health trusts doing a terrible job around the country, and there's high suicide rates linked to that, and the coroners issue preventable death notices, and the trust pays no attention.
So why is that?
Because it looks like the coroners are just being ignored. And it's a very, very worrying thing, because, you know, coroners are very important people. If they're saying there's a group of people dying unnecessarily, we ought to be paying more attention.
Well, we should. And according to this article, Birmingham City Council has implemented a media blackout and has refused to launch a public awareness campaign. They don't actually want to know how many deaths are being caused by the synthetic opioids. And so, therefore, drug users and the dealers also have no idea the heroin supply is actually being contaminated by the nitazines.
Well, maybe they're ordering a media blackout because they don't want the story covered, because they've got no answer.
They've got no answer. But then it brings me back to my argument, which is actually, should we relook at the classification of drugs generally? Because actually, I'd much rather people took safe supplies of drugs, because if you're going to take drugs and you're not going to affect that, then I'd rather they took supplies of drugs and they know what they're taking, so you know the side effect profile and you know how to deal with it.
So you're in favour of the legalisation and the decriminalisation?
I am.
OK, all right.
Are you?
Well, I don't want to get into trouble again.
No, well, that's also...
I'm always getting into trouble. But I agree with you. I'm a libertarian.
Oh, do you? Good.
I'm a libertarian. I believe people should do what they like as long as they don't cause suffering to other people. And I agree that the criminalisation aspect brings a whole criminal underworld thing into the whole thing, which wouldn't necessarily be there otherwise, I think.
And yet, you see, going back to politicians, they don't want to know. Because the minute I bring it up, and if it's Professor David Nutt, who was the chairman of the committee, the advisory committee on the misuse of drugs, he then came up and said, basically, we need to relook at all of this, and they fired him because they didn't like what he said.
Yeah.
Well, that's a problem.
Yeah, but he's got very radical ideas to do with that. He's not he's pro the legalisation and a whole rethinking on drug policy.
Let's just talk about prostate cancer, which is a subject very close to my heart. I don't know if you saw this, actually, but obviously there is no screening test for prostate cancer at the moment. We rely on something called a PSA. It's a terrible test. It's actually, you get loads of false positives. But there is a prostate cancer spit test, which they think is actually going to be very useful. This is the UK National Screening Committee is looking at the latest research. So what it's doing is looking at the DNA for 130 genetic variants linked to the cancer. This is brave new medicine and brave new world, and I think it's great.
Yeah, and it looks like it predicts people who are more likely to get it.
Yes.
So it's a very early detection system.
And that's great, isn't it? The fact is that at the moment, you see, and I'm at high risk, my dad died of prostate cancer, I'm at high risk. Now, when you have a PSA test, which is absolutely hopeless, you have no idea. All it tells you is the change in that level of PSA. It doesn't actually tell you, and it doesn't sort of, there is no linear relationship between that having prostate cancer itself. So I welcome anything like this.
Well, the National Health Service, emphasis on the word national, should really be pioneering in this area, but it tends to get diverted into dealing with emergencies and crises rather than prevention, which is where the real action is in medicine.
Absolutely. Let's talk about this very quickly, if I can. Weight Watchers, of course, that stalwart of...
they're wasting away, apparently.
They're very good. They are wasting away. Weight Watchers is planning to file for bankruptcy after failing to compete against the rise of the weight loss jabs. Of course, semaglutide, Wegovy, all that stuff, of course. No one wants to sit there and calorie count anymore. Just inject yourself. I find that absolutely fascinating in terms of demographic shift and what's happening to companies like Weight Watchers.
Yeah, but again, absolutely, because Weight Watchers there's an element, and all that non-injectable stuff was hard work to some extent.
Exactly.
And now there's something easier coming along. But what we'll find, always we find with these drugs, there's a curve whereby when the drug first is introduced, everyone thinks it's like life-saving and amazing, and then usually what happens further down the line is we discover side effects, and after a while, the use of it...
And they're very unpleasant, those side effects. From what I've heard.
Yeah.
From what I've heard. I mean, I was reading also here, Oprah Winfrey was the spokesperson for Weight Watchers.
She's taking the injection.
But she's taking the injections.
Yeah, apparently. And looks svelte.
I'm sure.
Now.
Anyway, that's just quite interesting. And there is another story, a health story, which I saw, which I also thought was very good. You and I know that often people are sent letters by the NHS. The letter arrives after your appointment, which is telling you you have an appointment. Lots of older people don't have electronic emails or, you know, smartphones or whatever else. So this is quite an interesting story. The NHS is going to get its own Royal Mail postage class to stop late letters leading to missed appointments. So they're going to introduce a barcode system to identify, separate and process NHS letters separately to other letters to make sure that they're delivered expeditiously.
Yeah, but I'm afraid to say the whole letter thing is another part of NHS mismanagement, which is massive, you know. And again, they're tinkering at the edges here. Fundamentally, the NHS is very poorly run. It's a top-down Soviet-style... employs 1.2 million people, top-down Soviet-style central planning, and it didn't work with the Soviet Union, and it doesn't work here. We've got to think more radically. about. We go back to my pie idea. We give everyone the health budget. They have their own health budget.
I like your pie.
They'd get about £3,000 a year, which they then spend. It'd be ring-fenced. They spend on healthcare. Give the power back to the consumer.
Yes, but I agree with you, and you see that you need a pie system. I understand your pie system.
We need to explain, we're talking about dividing the pie. That's why the word pie
so you have a pie. Do you want to explain it again? You have a pie.
Yeah, the pie being the whole big NHS budget, which is, I think, approaching 200 billion a year, I think.
Yes,
and you divide that up by every citizen of the UK. You'd have to have a British passport, and you get your health budget. So it's devolved down to the individual, and you get to decide how you spend that.
So you're paid that money every year, are you?
Yes, and it goes into a special account, and then you decide how you spend it. And you get about £3,000 a year, which is a lot of money to spend on healthcare, actually. And a family of 4 could share it, a street could share it, etc., etc. And also, you can do crowdfunding.
Does that mean that you eradicate NHS services?
No, what happens is the NHS would then compete to provide services which patients would then pay for. So that you'd introduce competition, and also you'd introduce the power of people being able to walk away from a poor service. At the moment, the poor patient can't walk away from a poor service. All they can do is complain about it. You give power back to the patient. That's the important thing, I think.
And also skin in the game. That's the other problem.
Yes,
there isn't any.
And also you incentivise people to look after their health, because they now realise they've got to save their health budget for a rainy day when they really hit something
Well,
bad.
that's the key to this, isn't it? I wonder how people would change their behaviour, because they realise that actually £3,000 is at stake, which is, as you say, a lot of money.
Yeah, so I think they'd look after themselves. That's the key point about my idea.
I think it's a very good one. It's a very good one. Let me know what you think of Dr. Raj's pie. Also, this morning, keep all your messages coming in. We're talking about some very serious stories as well. I'm asking, is it time to reconsider the death penalty? Your thoughts on that, please. David, good morning. This is Paul in Exeter. Bringing in the death penalty would lead to civil unrest in this country, leading to race riots. Hi, David and Raj. Yes, it is time the death penalty was brought back. This is Pam. Good morning. There are no deterrents in this country anymore. Added to that, we have imported into the third world that doesn't have the same values as the Britain we grew up with DNA and cameras. There should be no errors. Great show. A really good report with you and Raj. I'm paying him, that's why. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is still Talk. Good morning, 7:14.
It hasn't changed.
No, it hasn't changed at all. Good morning, Sunday, April the 13th. Dr. Raj Prostate is with me this morning. I'm asking, is it time to reconsider the death penalty in this country? This is based on Hashim Abedi and the attack in the prison. Your thoughts, please. 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. Let's talk about grooming gangs in this country, because this is a big story in The Sun this morning. Members of a grooming gang who preyed on teenage girls, they got £611,000 in legal aid. This is according to The Sun this morning. This is the Rotherham monsters, as they call them. This comes days after Labour went back on the abuse inquiry promises. Of course, they had promised that there would be these inquiries into what is going on in this country. As we know, 7 men were jailed for a combined 101 years in 2018 for grooming and abusing 5 girls in the South Yorkshire town from 1998 to 2005. Ringleader Mohammed Imran Ali Akhtar, 43, who was sentenced to 23 years in jail, got $143,000 in legal aid. His total doesn't include costs for a separate trial last year where he got a 12-year term for raping a girl of 13 after plying her with booze and drugs. 5 other defendants, aged from 40 to 45 and jailed for between 10 and 20 years, each received between $60,000 and $99,000 in legal aid. Look, the headlines look absolutely appalling, but I suppose the system is they can get legal aid.
I think you're allowed to get legal aid depending on your income, so I think it's means tested.
Yes, it is.
But I would also say these numbers are big, but partly they're big because the legal system takes so long to do anything.
As you say,
so the meter's running with the lawyers, so they often actually like the fact that the legal system takes so long to do anything because they make money out of it, I think.
I mean, it's just about very bad luck, isn't it?
Definitely. Yeah.
And just into, I mean, I don't know.
But everyone's entitled to a defence.
Well, weirdly, when I saw this story this morning, we had a conversation about it, and I said, look, this is the deal. This is the system. You are entitled to a defence and legal aid if you fall into that threshold. So you can't really complain about our system. But you're right about speeding up the courts and the justice system in this country. Yeah. But also, it goes back to the same problem, doesn't it? There aren't enough prison places.
Because although these people were found guilty, I have to make the point that during the time they were claiming the legal aid, I suspect they were not found guilty at that moment.
No,
so they were innocent. So you're innocent until proven
guilty. Well, quite. Let's talk about this as well. Another story here. Women's rights to be prioritised in an equality law revamp. Women-only spaces will be protected in an overhaul of equality laws under plans being considered by the government. Transgender people will be routinely asked to present a gender recognition certificate, and organisations are compelled to define the difference between sex and gender under proposed changes to the Equality Code. Last week, the Britain's human rights watchdog submitted a 310-page revised version of the statutory code of practices on services, public functions and associations to the government. The guidance was last amended in 2010. It's considered to be out of date by the Equality and Human Rights Commission. So they're looking for this radical overhaul because there are real concerns about protecting female-only spaces. And I read this morning and I broadly welcome it.
Well, the interesting thing about this is Trump, for all the things that people think he's done that are slightly crazy, he has gone very big on the whole transgender thing and trying to throw it out of the entrenchment it's had in the American system. And I think what people are surprised by is how popular that's proving, I think. So maybe Trump is having an effect around the world and people are rethinking this whole transgender agenda.
And I think the public around the country will welcome it as well, because actually it's really important that we make the differentiation between sex and gender. And it's been this kind of blur, hasn't it, up to now?
But the women-only space is very important because this idea that transgender creates the conditions under which women who are born women feel threatened.
Yes.
And I think that element, given their hundreds of, they're by far the vast majority, there's something strange about the rights of women have been neglected in that, I think.
I do too. Should we talk about Prozac?
If you want to.
Well, I do
Yet
want
again,
to.
I keep telling you, David, that you need
If you need it, just ask nicely.
That's right.
Yes, right.
Yeah. I gave you a script only 3 hours ago. I don't understand how you run out so quickly all the time.
You should try working here. Anyway, it's not about me, this.
Okay.
It's not. No,
Okay.
Prozac for your dog.
Okay.
Apparently, puppy Prozac surges tenfold as owners are medicating their anxious lockdown dogs. This is quite interesting, actually. So vets are saying that there is a massive rise in puppy Prozac. So there has been a tenfold increase over the past decade into the number of dogs in the UK on fluoxetine, which, as we know, is an antidepressant which is marketed under the trade name of Prozac, increasing the levels of the feel-good chemical serotonin in dogs' brain. And apparently, and I wonder what your thoughts are, according to this article, greater use of the medication reflects a wave of behavioural problems in puppies, which were bought in the pandemic lockdowns. So they weren't socialised properly. People who bought the dogs wanted some sort of cuddly little arrangement to sit there and look nice, but actually they didn't realise they were actually buying a dog. And dogs whine and bark and need to be walked.
And dogs need to be trained.
And trained.
Just like children need to be trained.
Yes, and psychiatrists.
So the thing is, we see this epidemic of children being diagnosed with ADHD, being prescribed...
They haven't got ADHD, have they?
Well, what's happened is they've got poor parenting. And poor parenting has created unruly, feral children. And if you try to tell the parents...
Tell me what you really think.
When you try to tell the parents, because I see a lot of this, they come and say, give the kids some medication. If you say to the parents, listen, you need to do your job better and be, you know, a better parent, and then the child will be okay. They abrogate their responsibility. But I think dogs are in a similar situation. I think dogs need good training from good trainers, good owners, and I think they're looking for a magic bullet answer. Very similar to parents and children.
Very similar. Well,
need to be kept on a leash.
Well, I'd agree with that. But apparently, according to the article, people wanted their pets to be fur babies, apparently, that stay quiet, believe medical intervention was the sign. Apparently, they looked at, this is Dr. Dan O'Neill, who's an associate professor at the Royal Veterinary College. They looked at data from 2.3 million dogs. 1 in 500 is now on fluoxetine.
So basically what was happening was the owner was looking for a dog to look after them, right?
Yes.
Deal with their own emotional needs.
Yes.
Whereas dogs need looking after, and you need to do the work to look after them, you know. And that's what's missing.
That is what's missing. But there ought to be a way that you get given advice on buying a dog before you buy a dog.
But also when they go for the dog Prozac, just like when people come to see me, they know they're going to get a rather tough response. I'm not going to prescribe. But doctors tend to bend over.
To me.
Yeah, you're different. The doctors tend to prescribe too easily, in my opinion. They don't resist the prescribing.
But you also know why that. But you know why that is, because doctors are under time pressure, and therefore it's easier to say yes to the prescription than it is to actually say you don't need it, and what we need to do is talk about the anxieties in your life and all the rest of it.
Yeah, and therefore the doctors are often telling people what they want to hear as opposed to what they need to hear. Yes. And the answer is to develop a very grumpy reputation, which I have, so the patient knows they're going to get a tough time. I always say, look, I'm really sorry, I'm going to be a bit blunt. They say, don't worry, Dr. Pazor, we've been warned.
I'll warn them. It's fascinating. Raj, thanks for the moment. Keep all your messages coming in this morning on everything that we are talking about. Lots more still to come. I do want to touch on Ed Miliband again and the eco-zealotry. Also, there are some British foods that have fallen out of fashion and favour. I saw this article, thought of you as the man who shows sartorial elegance, and I'm sure you have something to say about Patum Paperium. I'm sure you have. I'll give you time to think about it. Also, Robert Jenrick says the Hamas lawyers need to be struck off. And we'll also talk about Easter. English Heritage are now claiming that Easter isn't actually a Christian festival. That's all still to come. This is Weekend Breakfast.
People don't intervene, that staff and colleagues don't sort of charge in there. Even if they manage to sort of catch someone, there's a question of what happens if the police take hours to arrive. How are you meant to, hold someone there? So it's a really difficult situation. And alongside this rise in theft is a rise in violence and abuse against shop workers, which is really concerning. Over 2,000 incidents every single day against shop staff.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk 7:52 on Sunday, April the 13th. I'm joined by Dr. Raj Prostate, who's looking very angry at me this morning. Hi, David and Raj. This is Pam. Great show. A really good rapport with you and Raj. Thank you. It is time the death penalty was brought back. There are no deterrents in this country. Keep all those messages coming in. I'm really keen to hear your thoughts on all of the above as well.
Can I just make a point about the death penalty?
Yes,
as
you
to
can.
why parliamentarians may be against it. And I may have got this wrong, but if I recall correctly, the last person to be executed in Britain, it was an incident to do with a policeman got shot on the rooftop of a Croydon warehouse, and the guy who did the shooting didn't get the death penalty, but his accomplice said give it to him. Did give it to him mean shoot the policeman, or did it mean give the gun to the policeman, in other words surrender? And there's controversy to this day about what actually happened, and I think one of the reasons why parliamentarians are against the death penalty is these last few cases that happened, 50 years ago or whatever, were a bit dodgy, and therefore they're worried about that. They're worried about that dodginess coming back.
But we agreed that in this case of Hashim Abedi, that there is no worry about a miscarriage of justice.
I'm just explaining historically why
I understand.
There's a gap between our elected representatives who are against the death penalty and the vast swathes of the population, the vast majority of which are in favour of the death penalty.
What about having a referendum on it?
Not a bad idea. That would be very popular, I suspect. But then Parliament would be forced to do something it doesn't want to do, just bring it back in.
Like Brexit. It didn't want to do that, did it?
Yeah.
I mean, it is interesting. And then also there are questions over whether we have governance by referenda. And we don't, as a matter of fact. As a matter of course, we don't have governance by referenda.
The vast majority of lawyers, if I got this right, are against the death penalty. So again, you've got a judicial system that may not implement it. They may not be in favour of it. You're going to be worried about that. If the sentence has to be death penalty and they don't want to do that, they may turn somersaults to avoid that.
Let's just talk about this then, talking about lawyers. This is according to Robert Jenrick. The lawyers trying to remove Hamas from the UK's list of proscribed terrorist groups should be investigated and potentially struck off. This is according to Robert Jenrick. The Shadow Justice Secretary says there should be a thorough and transparent investigation of Riverway law by the Solicitors Regulation Authority. He said there's a clear need to uphold public confidence in the legal profession and to ensure rigorous enforcement of the UK sanctions regime. It does seem very odd that you've got lawyers challenging the government's decision to prescribe a terrorist organisation.
Yes, but I mean, lawyers, because they often have to defend very unpleasant people, the legal system does require that people have a defence, and lawyers often may question these things. They are entitled as lawyers to do things that we find very unpopular, we don't agree with, but there is a sense in which the legal system does require people like lawyers to often do things we don't like, because the legal system requires challenge, and very, very bad people who are very guilty do still need a defence.
So what Riverway is arguing is that the prescription should be lifted under the ECHR for freedom of speech protection. It claims the ban is disproportionate and Hamas poses no threat to the UK people. I would argue that's absolute nonsense.
Your argument may well be something that I agree with.
Right.
The point we're making is lawyers often get it in the neck because they're often having to do things that we don't like, but the legal system does require lawyers to sometimes represent very, very bad people.
Yes.
You're giving me a very withering look there.
I know I am, but I'm just looking at you thinking that what kind of person would put themselves forward to represent Hamas?
Well, OK, but I mean, the lawyers are required to defend people over and over again who everyone thinks definitely are guilty. Maybe the evidence is that they're guilty, but there's still a legal process that has to be gone through. There's still, a legal system that means lawyers often have to do things that are very unpopular.
OK. Right, I want to talk about traditional British foods. You look like a chap who knows what he likes. Gentleman's Relish, Shipman's Paste, Bath Oliver's, Liam Perrin's sauce, apparently. The name's reminiscent of our grandparents' larder, a bygone age. This is quite interesting, actually. So these delicacies came about because of the Victorians. They developed items that had a tangy or salty flavour. So they developed sauces such as oyster catsup and Worcestershire sauce to pep up their meals. And also, you'd like this, upper classes of the era, which suits you very well, they had a course called savouries, where at the end of the meal, the men went off a port, a smoke and a snack, such as potted chicken livers or gentleman's relish. Now, I mentioned gentleman's relish because I had it when I was at medical.
Sounds very dodgy. What is it?
Gentleman's relish is patum purpureum. This was...
What is that?
It's disgusting, is what it is. It is... I don't actually know what's in it. I think it's like salty... I want to say, like sardines.
But cheese on toast is a famous thing that used to happen at the end of a meal in the Victorian times as well.
Yes.
It was a savoury thing
it's
after the dessert.
An afternoon high tea, isn't it? I can imagine you having high tea. Apparently, yes, so patum purpureum was invented in 1828 by John Osborne. It was also made famous in For Your Eyes Only by James Bond. Shipman's paste, the fish paste, are you a fan?
No idea what these very
Fish
strange
paste.
things are that you're talking about.
Oh, it's absolutely revolting as well. That was developed in 1750s. Worcestershire sauce, apparently, invented by accident in the 1830s. Mr. Lee and Mr. Perrins invented a disgusting pungent...
Big fan. I'm a big fan of Worcestershire sauce because, of course, that famous thing called the Bloody Mary.
Well, funny you should say that.
Which is a great drink.
But do you know that that was an advertising campaign that put that into Worcestershire sauce by the agency Multiply? They relaunched Lee and Perrins in 2023. And, of course, they then pushed the Bloody Mary.
Which is an excellent breakfast drink.
It is. I think it's time for a Bloody Mary, actually. Don't you? Would you be game if I get Dean to make us a Bloody Mary?
Definitely.
Also, lots more going on. Also, there's a shake-up going on at airports. They're going to try and scrap boarding passes and check-ins. So, ideally, this journey pass would come in. So, essentially, all your data stored on a phone, you walk through, and essentially it knows whether you're in the airport, whether you're getting on the flight. Is that a step too far?
No, I think it's an excellent idea if it makes travel easier, because travel's a nightmare at the moment.
It certainly is. Raj, thank you ever so much for your time this morning. It's been a great pleasure, as ever. Are you off to play tennis today?
I am afraid I am. And I'm now going to have a Bloody Mary. Now you brought it up.
Before the tennis?
Yes, I'm obsessed now. Thinking
it's a
about
brilliant idea. Also, maybe your lobbing shots get better after a Bloody Mary.
It's called precision lobbing. There's a debate at the tennis club about this.
Is that right? Is that right?
Yes, it does annoy people.
Are we playing singles or doubles?
We'll play doubles, definitely.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah, we'll challenge you to a game.
No, so
we'll have to
seriously.
report the result afterwards.
Yes, look, I'm very happy to play tennis with you.
Okay, right.
I have a feeling you'd be pretty demonic in your posture.
Me, competitive?
Yes, exactly. Well, all doctors are, aren't they? Raj, thanks ever so much for coming in this morning. Really, really good to see you. And make sure you do come again soon, and we'll play tennis as well. Keep all those messages coming in, please. On a very serious note, I'm asking this morning: is it time to reconsider the death penalty? The number 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can also message us on X as well at talkTV. Now, after the break, I'm going to take you through the front pages once again. I'm going to talk about the latest stories making the news this morning. Also, in our future politics panel, that's coming up later with Kendall, Harper Rayes and Adam Dale. That's coming up after the break as well. This is Weekend Breakfast. Don't go anywhere. A very good morning to you.
We've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino? Blimey.
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like someone out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field." Put your foot down. This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Shoplifting years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. and then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, Christ, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as a family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
And one here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. Is an Aussie that has been dive-bombed by our version of the Magpie, which is much bigger, every springtime.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, very good morning to you. Just after 8 o'clock on Sunday, April the 13th. I'm David Bull, and this is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning if you've just joined us. Where have you been? 2 hours in already. Weather not looking that brilliant at the moment, but welcome along. Great news if you have just joined us, of course. It's International Plant Appreciation Day. That's right, it's a perfect day to bring home a new houseplant, also to pamper those that are already in your house. And now, did you know that plants like it when we talk to them? And also, they love classical music, apparently.
And you don't bring me flowers anymore.
Very good, Dave. Today is also the London Eurovision Party. This is where current and former contestants showcase their songs in front of fans and also international media. Now, as I was saying, Eurovision actually starts in exactly a month today. I can't believe it's come round again. It starts on the 13th of May in Basel in Switzerland. Yeah, baby, to all Eurovision fans.
Will you promise that you'll say your kisses for me?
So that was Brotherhood of Man, I think. Save Your Kisses for Me. When was that? About 1976? You'll come back to me on that. Also, it's International Scrabble Day today, a day that celebrates the popular board game. Now, the day was picked to honour its creator, Alfred Moshe Butt, who was actually born on this day. So happy Scrabble Day.
For me. Scrabble, Scrabble, it's a wordy delight. Putting letters together, what a beautiful sight.
I'm just being told, by the way, Brotherhood of Man, Save Your Kisses for Me. I was right. 1976. Well done. I was quite old already at 1976. Right, let's move on and start this hour's show, shall we?
Today's fascinating facts.
Well, today's fascinating facts, and this hour's fascinating facts, on this day in 1892, the birth of Sir Robert Alexander Watson Watt, considered by many to be the inventor of radar. The system provided the vital advance information that helped the Royal Air Force win the Battle of Britain. On this day in 1912, the formation of the Royal Flying Corps, which was actually later incorporated into the RAF. And on this day in 1937 was the birth of Edward Fox, of course, the stage, film and television actor. He's generally associated with portraying the role of the upper-class Englishman, such as the title character in the film The Day of the Jackal, which was filmed in 1973, and King Edward VIII in Edward and Mrs. Simpson, and that was filmed in 1978. And those are this hour's fascinating facts.
Weekend breakfast, can't start it the wrong way. The David Bull Show, your bright Sunday.
Well, a very good Good morning to you. 6 minutes past 8 on Sunday, April the 13th. Thanks ever so much for your company. Let's just look at the front pages. If you are just joining us, this is the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. Jihadist attacks 3 jail guards. This is one of the Islamist terrorists behind the terrible atrocity of the Manchester Arena bombing, has attacked 3 prison officers with weapons and cooking oil in a high-security jail. This is Hashim Abedi, who was sentenced, if you remember. How on earth he got cooking oil, how he had implements, how he managed to attack prison guards is beyond belief to me. Nigel Farage, the Reform UK leader, said this monster should never have been in a position to hurt our brave prison officers. It is worth remembering, now it is key here, that actually he's a UK citizen, was born in this country, but it's worth remembering, as Nigel Farage says, this family came from asylum system, seekers. This system is broken. The Sunday Times this morning, the Navy on alert to escort fuel in the steel crisis. We spoke about this yesterday, and of course Parliament being recalled, the legislation going through at record pace through the Commons, through the Lords, the amendments made, and then finally to Royal Assent by 6 o'clock yesterday. And now it transpires that actually Ginjay, the current owners, hadn't ordered any fuel for the blast furnaces. So there is a real concern that there isn't enough fuel to keep the blast furnaces operating. Now, if they go out, they're too expensive to restart. So the story this morning is that ministers could send the Royal Navy to escort a fuel shipment to Scunthorpe's blast furnaces after Parliament voted to seize control of British Steel to ensure its survival. Now, the location, according to this, and the details of the cargo have not been confirmed, but it is said to be coking coal, which is vital to keeping the furnaces running, which, by the way, and this is a stroke of idiocy, we are importing into this country instead of actually mining our own. But anyway, that's not the point. It is the last plant capable of producing virgin steel, which is absolutely paramount to build things like railways and aircraft or munitions or construction. So I don't understand how this was suddenly a last-minute decision by the government. The Ministry of Defence said no decision has been taken on the involvement of the Navy at this particular time. Big story in the Mail. This is the bombshell email that could free Lucy Letby. Raj and I were talking about this earlier. It does seem very odd, this case. This all is based around the evidence given by Dr. Ravi Jayaram, and it now transpires that there is an explosive email appearing to contradict prosecution claims that Lucy Letby was caught red-handed with a baby who subsequently died. This is Ravi Jayaram. He testified, directly linking the baby's death, testifying that she was standing over baby Kay's cot as the girl was deteriorating and that she did not call for help. Now, that is contradicted by this email that has turned up, and there are huge questions to be asked about the safety of that verdict, and that's in the Mail. And then the Observer, Rachel Reeves, calls for a global free trade fight back to protect the UK economy. I'm asking this morning, based on Hashim Abedi, do we now have to reconsider whether we bring back the death penalty? This is a man who was put in prison for committing an appalling atrocity by killing children in this country at a concert. He is being kept at His Majesty's pleasure. Now, the question I have for you this morning is it time to reconsider bringing back the death penalty for those crimes where we are absolutely certain of the perpetrator and what that perpetrator did? The number to call, 0344 499 1000, calls charged at the national rate. You can also text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well at talkTV. Keep all of those messages coming in. Just very quickly, though, Graham Haitley, good morning to you. Graham says, now, David, if we had the death penalty, where would Lucy Letby be now? Worth thinking about. Keep those messages coming in, please, this morning. It's now time for the Future Politics panel.
The Future Politics panel.
Well, joining me this morning, I'm delighted to say, is Kendall Harper-Rayes, who is a student, and joining her, Adam Dale, political commentator. Good morning to the two of you.
Good morning.
Morning. And now you're back again, so very nice to see you. And Kendall, it's your first time here.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I study politics and criminology at college. I used to be a member of Reform, but I did recently cancel my membership.
Okay.
I was just a bit disappointed with the leadership, but I do still think that they are the best party for Britain, and I probably still will be voting for them.
OK, and so you were disappointed in the leadership. Can I ask why?
Yeah, of course. So the way they handled the Rupert Law situation, in my opinion, it was very poor. Also, Tommy Robinson issue, in my opinion, when Nigel Farage said that Tommy Robinson had been to prison for violence against women when he hadn't. I just thought it was a very poor thing to say. OK, so you're obviously very politically involved, and we're delighted to have you, and it's very good to have you back as well.
Thank you.
Shall we start then talking about what is, I actually think, a very difficult story this morning, which is in the Sunday Telegraph, and I talked about this. This is Hashim Abedi. Counter-terrorism police are now investigating after this Islamist terrorist behind the Manchester Arena bombing attacked 3 prison officers with weapons and cooking oil in a high-security jail. This is at HMP Franklin in Durham. Hashim Abedi is serving life for 22 murders in the Manchester Arena bombing. Just to remind everyone, just in terms of what he did, Salman Abedi and his brother Hashim Abedi did, they killed 22 people, they injured 1,017, they destroyed the arena's foyer. It was the deadliest act of terrorism, the first suicide bombing in the United Kingdom since the 7th of July 2005 London bombings. Allegedly, at the time, he said he was motivated by the deaths of Muslim children resulting from the American-led intervention in the Syrian civil war. So there are lots of questions I have here. First of all, let's just talk about the governance in a prison. How on earth did this man, who is a threat to people, where he has been sentenced to life for 22 murders in the Manchester Arena bombing, come into a position where he is able to get in contact with boiling hot oil? He manages to get weapons. He's managed to threaten the lives of people who are there to keep him safe. There is clearly a catastrophic problem going on in Britain's prisons.
I would agree completely. I think that the fact he is absolutely a high security risk to everybody in this country, and he was able to get access to those, I think that shows the lack of security in those prisons. I think it's disgusting.
What do you think is going on behind the scenes, just in terms of the governance of these prisons? Is it the fact that actually we don't pay enough money, we don't build enough prison places, we've got the wrong people looking after high-risk terrorists in this country, and actually someone like him should not be allowed into a position where he gets cooking on and implements?
No, I completely agree in that sense. I think the governance of prisons here at the moment, we all know, it's in a state of disarray, the prison system. Who you blame that on? You'd probably argue the last government more than the current one. It's been a very short period of time. They are trying to make reform in the prison system. Bringing in, obviously, trying to stop as many people going to prison is one part of it.
Yeah.
Minor offences, those type of things. Trying to get people out of prison is another part of it, but we are bursting at the seams in prisons, and that's why you can see why he's ended up with having all of these things you probably shouldn't have in prison.
I mean, it's quite interesting, actually. We talked about prison is such an unusual situation, and that Raj was talking about how you often fall in love with your captors, or at least the people guarding those prisoners, become sort of involved with them, and they believe they aren't the risk that they are. Now, clearly, he is a huge threat to people still. Let me ask you the question I'm asking at home, or people at home. Is it time, do you think, that we rethink the death penalty in this country?
I would agree with the death penalty in this case. Bearing in mind he has taken the lives of a lot of people, a lot of innocent children. I think that the death penalty would be a good way, because I don't think the taxpayers should be paying to keep him in prison. I also think in the case of the death penalty, we should only obviously use it if we 100% know the person. So I wasn't for the death penalty until the case of Axel Ruda Cabana, where I thought actually we should bring it back, and this is another case where I thought we should use it.
I understand all of that, but actually isn't that the easy way out? And one of the things that Raj was saying was that actually in many ways people like this who are fanatical, who have these ideological beliefs, that is the ultimate sacrifice. Because if you're put to death by the state that you are trying to injure and hurt, then you have succeeded. Yeah,
I would sort of agree. I just think that losing your life is the worst possible thing, and I think that the families that were affected and should be able to say, you know, I want him dead, or I don't want him dead. But I think in this case he should be put to death.
What do you think?
I don't think we should bring back the death penalty, and it brings back mixed emotions for me in terms of, yes, he is a waste in terms of the state, but you're completely right. By killing him, you make a martyr of him. It's exactly what he wants.
Yes.
And we don't really want to stand in a position where we go backwards 50 to 100 years probably now, back to the death penalty era, and you look at other countries with death penalty records, Saudi Arabia, do we really want the same sort of record as them? Where's the line when it comes to death penalty? Do we just want to create a new story out of nothing?
What about Kendall's point? Where's the justice for those families of the 1,070, the 22 people killed, the 1,000 people injured?
This is where my opinion is.
So where is the justice? So you commit that atrocity, right? We then lock you up, we give you entitlements, we give you food, we give you water, you're allowed to exist, you have, you know, in many ways, you're allowed, if you have good behaviour in those prisons, you're allowed to do more and more and more. Where is the message in that?
I do think there needs to be a bit of a review of the end state, the most extreme cases. Now, I don't think that should transcend to death penalty.
Okay, so if it isn't the death penalty, what is it?
Much more restricted, something that is actually quite punishing, some sort of form of isolated confinement. Make it really clear that for the rest of his life, it's going to be miserable, really miserable. And by sectioning off that and making it almost a special offence area where they're not given privileges, not allowed to climb out of that place for good behaviour, you're saying you're in the pit, basically. I just can't bring myself to agree with the opinion of just killing people, because where's the line?
Okay, how would you counter that to Adam, who doesn't believe in the death penalty? Also, just in terms of that, my worry about this is that you then almost martyr them by putting all the people who've committed the same sort of offences in a unit together. There is already a major problem in prisons of radicalisation already going on in prisons. So how do you stop that?
Well, I think the solitary confinement issue, I think the wrong people are put in solitary confinement, because you've got these big offenders like the terrorists who are able to get cooking oil, yet you've got somebody releasing a documentary in solitary confinement. I think it's ridiculous. But in terms of stopping the radicalisation, I honestly think that big offenders who've committed these terrorist attacks, the only way to kind of stop it is put them to death.
What about the idea, and we floated it earlier on this morning, what about building isolation units that are not in this country, offshore somewhere, where you have a very draconian treatment, where you have no entitlements whatsoever, you see 4 walls 24/7, you're allowed out, say, an hour a day?
I would agree with that. However, I don't think this government is hard enough to be able to put that into place.
Do you think any government is?
Probably not.
And why is that, though? If you and I feel so passionate about it, I think we all feel very passionately about this. How dare someone take the lives of these young children? If we feel so passionate and we elect politicians, what is the disconnect? Why don't politicians actually do what we tell them?
I think it's a lack of... I think there's some basis of, you know, corruption in political parties where we'll go back on promises.
Is it corrupt? But is that corruption, or is it actually they renege on their promises?
We'll go back on promises, like Labour, they've lied to the public and things like that. So I think that they're too soft on these criminals, and I think that the only way to go would be the death penalty, or like the option you said, offshore in 4 walls. I think that would also be a good idea.
What about that? If we offshore people, we build a big confinement centre, you send the most radical people there, they never leave. They are never allowed freedom ever again.
It makes me think a little bit of the Bibby Stockholm.
Okay.
In a sense. Obviously,
although to be fair, they got food and lodging, and they were sitting there, and they had 4 people in a room.
Different scenario,
yeah,
but a floating something off of the sea, it kind of brings back...
Well, I'm thinking more of an Alcatraz.
Potentially, yeah. And I can agree with you up to a certain point there, and I think there's a kind of missing point here, which is any party that gets in and governs on this basis is going to come up against the same issue, which is a human rights issue when it comes to legal courts.
So we need to leave the ECHR then?
But I think that would transcend the ECHR as well. I think any legal system, you're going to have challenges trying to impose anything close to what you're asking.
Okay, what about this then? We have a referendum. We put it to the public. We say, you vote. Do we bring back the death penalty?
the trouble you've got with referendums, as we've seen in the last one, is you might have a yes or no, but there's all of these opinions in the middle. And
well, this is pretty obvious, isn't it? Yes or no?
Yes or no, I suspect, and this is just anecdotal, it will come out as a no, I suspect, in this country. But at the same time, then it gets to a yes. What happens at yes? Where do the rules? It's like
Isn't
Brexit.
it the wording?
We had Brexit with a yes.
No, we haven't Brexit, but let's not go down that rabbit hole. So what about a referendum? Why don't we just say, on this particular issue, because it is so pertinent and it's so sensitive, that you put it to the public? I'm not sure, actually. I think if you put, and it is all in the wording, if you then word it for the most violent, disgusting crimes and, for example, killing children, should we bring back the death penalty? If we word it like that,
then I think it would be a very clear yes.
Do you?
Definitely,
what
yes.
percentage do you think it would be?
I think it would be probably around maybe a 40% gap.
So 60% in favour, you reckon? See, I think it might be higher.
I think there's some people who are very soft and don't want to give criminals the justice that they actually deserve.
I also wonder what it does to the families, you know, just in terms of, I understand that they may well feel that this individual deserves the death penalty, but in many ways, actually, it's too easy, isn't it, just to allow that person to escape justice, because it's an easy way out.
There is an argument for that, and I understand that point. I just think that in the prisons we've got in the UK, where you're allowed access to food, you're getting treated well. What is the justice for that? How is that justice?
That's where the issue, the crux of it is. I think it's how they're treated in prison is the key. I can't get past the fact that you're basically giving him what he wants by martyring him. I cannot get past that. And any of these sort of high terror offences, they're always going to be the same, or they're almost asking for it in a way, because that's the mentality, that's the belief. They believe they're going to be going to a better place based on that thing alone. They've attacked the state, that's their enemy. That for me is even more wrong than killing them, because by shipping them off and punishing them, putting them, isolating them, making their life miserable, is that not far worse a punishment than giving him what he wants in this scenario?
It may well be. Thank you very much for your considered opinions this morning. Let me throw that open to all of you at home, actually, as well. Is it time to reconsider the death penalty? What about a referendum? Should we actually ask the public? Under these specific circumstances, if someone commits these particular atrocities, should we then bring back the death penalty to this country? 0344 499 1000, those calls charged at the national rate. We'll continue with our Future Politics panel after this break.
But the idea that in our politics at the moment we are obsessing about a fictional drama series, I think tells you all you need to know about our political class not actually facing up to the reality of the problem. I mean, I'll give props actually to the leader of the Conservative Party, Kenny Badenoch, who said, no, I haven't watched it and I don't need to watch it to understand the problems of Britain. It's a fictional series. I don't need to watch it any more than I need to watch Casualty to understand what's going on in the National Health Service.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk. So many opinions coming in about the death penalty this morning. I'm joined this morning by Kendall Harper-Reyes, who's a student, Adam Dale, who's a political commentator. This is in the middle of our Future Politics panel. Should we talk about my favourite politician, Ed Miliband? This is actually what Richard Tice, he calls him Jet Ed now. This is Ed Miliband. He spent 10 times more on foreign trips than his Tory predecessor. I thought he was head of net zero. Anyway, the figures have revealed he spent 62,712 on overseas travel since coming to power last year. This is according to analysis by the Taxpayers Alliance. When you look at Claire Coutinho, who was the predecessor to Ed Miliband, he spent 62 grand. She spent 6,000 in the first 6 months, compared with Ed Miliband. Now, here's the great blinking hypocrisy. This is Ed Miliband who says you mustn't take flights.
It's absolutely insane. Ed Miliband, he says one thing, don't take flights, yet he's spending all this money to take flights. I don't understand what that about it is net zero.
Oh, because you don't understand. You see, net zero doesn't apply to him, it just applies to everyone else.
Well, I think that is just delusional. It's like what he said with the we should ban coal mines because he wanted to send a signal for climate change, yet he's getting 55,000 tonnes of coal brought in on a diesel-powered ship. Yes. A 6,000-mile journey.
So do you think that actually he wakes up sometimes and thinks, oh, there's actually no joined-up thinking at all in what I'm doing?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Now, I know you probably have a different opinion.
I do have a different... I actually think this is a bit of a non-story. Right. The reason why... You say rubbish, right. So the reason why...
I do say rubbish.
The predecessor you're comparing him to is in an existing Tory government.
Right.
So if you look at the first predecessor, I'm talking about the first...
Come on, no, you're fine. Let's do... No, I'm not interested.
Comparing him to the wrong people, right?
All right, well, but the point is, Ed Miliband wants us to wear Hessian underwear and not to go out, that we have to paddle in a canoe, not take flights abroad, you can't go to Benidorm on holiday, you can't have a nice time. That's what Ed Miliband wants.
His job is to interact with heads of different countries.
So he can do it on the phone, Zoom.
If you're a new government...
Why doesn't he do it on Zoom?
There's an argument for that, I get it.
There is an argument.
I get it, but at the same time, you have to go, you know probably as well as I do, you have to meet people in person in some scenarios. You can't do everything over a telephone. He needs to be out there as the new government, getting to see people, his counterparts. You're going to spend money doing that in the first case. Claire Coutinho is at the end of a Tory government that's already had those meetings. So it's unfair to draw comparisons between the two.
I do like what Richard Tice said. He said no longer Red Ed, he's now Jet Ed, the flying green hypocrite. I mean, just in terms of this, he keeps telling us that there is a climate emergency. There is a real sort of, I think, contrast with Rachel Reeves. Do you think Ed Miliband's about to be kicked out of Cabinet?
Well, I'd hope so. I think that if he's saying one thing and then doing the complete opposite, how are we supposed to trust the government?
So, and also, just into how old are you? You're
17.
17. I was 17 once. Just as a 17-year-old, we're told all the time that young people are very interested in the climate. It's the most important climate emergency we've ever faced. Da, da, da. Is that true?
From where I go to college, obviously I'm friends with a lot of people that are very political, and climate change is never really brought up as an issue.
I disagree in the sense of maybe just slightly different age groups, but it's... For me, there's a lot of people that I speak to. Maybe it's just who you're around and what bubbling. You know my dad quite well.
I do know your dad.
Very much into the weather and the climate, and so therefore I get his opinion on things, and it filters down.
But you're a grown-up now. You can make up your own mind.
Of course. I'm not. I don't think I'm quite as strict on climate as he is.
No, I don't think so either.
But at the same time, I get the point. There are disasters happening everywhere. And
there are, but also the disasters of people not being able to put food on the table or heat their homes.
Of course. So there's a trade-off balance between these things. But the faster we move towards something that is climate-friendly and...
OK, so how does the government square this, where you've got Ed Miliband, who's preaching about net zero, and Rachel Reeves and all the rest of them who are expanding airports?
Well, one of them's growth. They're trying to play a balancing act, aren't they? I guess that's the square point you're coming back to.
How long has Ed Miliband got in government?
I think he'll continue. I think they've got confidence in him, yeah.
You have confidence in him?
I think they... I have very little bad to say about him, I must admit. I think there's a lot of headline grabbing around his name, and potentially his job is quite difficult, right? Because he's got to weigh against the government who are going for growth while he's trying to go for climate.
Do you think that actually what we're seeing actually is the reality of being in government? So in opposition you can say anything you like, you can talk about net zero, you can say we need to green the planet, all the rest of it. Look, I'm a great believer we need to move towards a greener future, but that for me involves nuclear power, it involves a transition period, it also means not making people poorer in the interim, and I'm not sure that I think that's the change that's happened in government, is that you've gone from an opposition where you can say anything into the realities of government, where Rachel Reeves is looking at a terrible economic outlook, where we're going to see interest rate cuts coming in because the economy simply isn't growing, and the tension between the two is just unbearable.
Yeah, I would agree, and obviously when you're in opposition it's easier to call out things because you don't really have to act as much as the government does. But with Rachel Reeves and Ed Miliband, they've promised all these things, they said they're going to do these things, they've got in government, and now it's hard for them to stick to these things, like Ed Miliband going on a plane but saying don't fly, so he can fly but we can't. How are we supposed to put our trust in the government when they're all over the place?
And what's your sense from, you talk about you mix with a lot of politically affiliated people or people who are very interested in politics. What's the overall feeling from young people just in terms of the direction of this country? I asked the question, I think it was yesterday, saying what is the future of the United Kingdom?
Well, I have some friends who are, on the right wing, I have some friends who are on the left wing, and they are all concerned about the future of this country with all sides of the spectrum. But I think the main thing that is brought up within young people, especially in my college, because we have like a debate society kind of thing, it's always the one word immigration, which always gets brought up from both sides of the spectrum.
Does it?
Yes.
Legal or illegal?
Mostly illegal, but people do make arguments that legal is still out of control. And
your age group, what are your peers talking about?
I think there's an over-inflated sense of doom in this country. I feel like everyone thinks we're all having a bad time, we're all on a bad...
Well, we're not having a great time.
Not having a great time, but you have to look at the world circumstances. And I don't completely blame the Tories for that. I mean, what we had for the last 14 years, flip-flopping between different Tory governments, but you look at what they had to come up against in the final few years of their premiership, and I mean, you're talking about pretty much a global conflict played out in Ukraine, and you're talking about all of these different disasters and things happening in different parts of the world. They're going to make the economic circumstances here difficult. We were already told that.
Well, all right, what mark would you give the Labour government out of 10 for their first few months in 8 months in office?
I'd actually like them to go further. So from my perspective, and it might not be the same, it might be different reasons for my mark being lower, but I'd give them a 6 or a 7. And the reason for that is I'd like to see them go a lot further on European ties, and you're going to completely roll your eyes at that potentially.
It's not for me to say, is it?
But I do believe that there's a lot more strident things they could be doing with the majority, and I think they need to be brave, because as we see from some of the polls today about the EU relationships, a lot of people are in favour of reconnecting with Europe.
OK, well, we'll pause there. We'll come back to that after this break. Adam and Kendall, thank you very much for the moment. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
Across the UK, on DAB+, On your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk 8:36. I'm in the middle of the Future Politics panel this morning with Kendall Harper-Rayes and also Adam Dell. So Adam just mentioned that voters want closer ties with the EU, and obviously I rolled my eyes. Now, according to The Guardian this morning, a clear majority of UK voters want the government to concentrate on rebuilding trade ties with the EU over forging a new economic deal with the United States. This is according to research published this weekend. It's a study based on analysis of polling using new methods of questioning participants, suggests people of voting age now see their economic interest in the UK as far more closely linked to open trade relations with the EU neighbours than any deals that Keir Starmer might strike with the US. Were you a Brexiteer? Were you in support of an independent, sovereign, self-governing country?
Obviously, well, I couldn't vote,
well,
but,
I know that.
but yeah, I was for Brexit. And I think in terms of this, we should be prioritising the US trade deal, because Donald Trump, of course, if he's putting tariffs on everything and we are subject to tariffs, our main priority should be the trade deal with the US, not the EU. But I'm not completely opposed. If it's in Britain's best interest and it's a good trade deal, I'm not completely opposed.
Adam?
I think there's a general consensus that both are what we need, both trade deals. And this isn't a question of rehashing Brexit in this scenario. I know that there's undertones of it, and anything getting close to...
It does smack of that.
Anything getting close to reigniting our relationship with Europe sounds like we're rehashing Brexit, but actually in this scenario, we still keep what is perceived to be the benefit of Brexit, which is the sovereignty element. I disagree with that anyway, but let's take that. You don't
like the government actually making decisions on behalf of the people that they govern?
I don't think that decisions were being made by Europe as readily as what we were told to believe, which is that the European Court wasn't... The European Union wasn't making all of our decisions for us. It never was.
Of course it was. I was there. I was in the European Parliament.
The vast majority of our decisions were being made at home.
No, they weren't.
They were.
No, they weren't. That's the reason that the government is so out of sort of order. Both the last administration and this one is because we basically gave all of the rights and responsibilities to the European Union.
I think
that was part of the problem.
All's too strong a word. It's a catch-all, as if we were completely dominated by European Parliament. We weren't.
We were.
OK, we'll agree to disagree. Right. But on this specific point, there is benefit in doing deals with Europe now, especially for younger people. You look at it and you go, the free movement of younger people, that educational movement
but
should be there.
But you can have carve-outs.
Yes, so we're looking at it now, and that poll, I think, captures it. I know you don't like it, maybe it's a Guardian headline, but it's...
I didn't say I didn't like it. This is a sample of 4,703 people responded to YouGov between the 31st of March and the 2nd of April. I mean, I think there is a real sense that actually Donald Trump... I mean, even I, and I'm a huge America-phile, I'm beginning to think Donald Trump is very unstable in terms of what he's doing, and Raj and I spoke about it this morning. I don't really know what Donald Trump is doing. I'm not even sure Donald Trump knows what he's doing right now. And so, look, I'm in favour of having a close relationship with Europe, like a family of Europe. I don't want a federal Europe. And there is a big difference between those two.
Yeah, I would agree. I would probably still make the argument that we are still kind of under European laws with the ECHR. I think that Brexit hasn't been done properly because we haven't left that. We're still under all those articles. So
Tell him that. See? It's not just me.
I think some of the common laws of Europe are completely understandable and acceptable. I think there's a general consensus about human rights, and I don't think that we should be tiptoeing around it going, we want to break the whole basket.
But it's actually the interpretation of the ECHR that's the problem.
Potentially, there are issues. There's always issues inside a big tent. That's the trouble you've got.
Oh, you sound like a politician.
Yeah, I know that does.
It really does sound like a politician's answer. Just in terms of that, though, do you think that actually most young people would favour a closer relationship? I get the point actually about freedom of movement of young people, because I think that was a great benefit. I think one of the other things is the ability to actually say settle in another country, because actually what's undermined Brexit, as far as I can see, is that despite saying we're going to protect our own borders and we are going to stop the boats and all the stuff that was promised, none of that's happened. It's actually undermined it. People are seeing change in this country they do not like, and leaving the EU seems to have not improved that in the slightest.
No, I would agree, and I do blame that mostly on the ECHR, because there's people who, asylum seekers, immigrants who have committed offences, yet they've been granted the right to stay because of the ECHR, which I think is completely ridiculous.
I mean, there are some, as I say, I think a lot of this is about interpretation of the ECHR rulings themselves as well, and there needs to be much stricter sort of criteria for the judges. Let me just ask you about this very quickly. This is in the Telegraph. Cambridge University should stop telling students how their exam results compare to their peers. This is the university is going to look at whether to scrap what they call tripos rankings. They were introduced in 1748 and tell students how the end of the year marks compare with the rest of their cohort. So essentially, under the planned shake-up, so when I went to university, you basically got your grade. It was put, you didn't even get an envelope, actually. They put it on the board and you could see how you did compared with everyone else. Do you think people are the students now are too soft? They're too worried about their own sort of self-preservation and worth, and so therefore they don't actually want to know how they did compared with everyone else?
Yeah, I think that. So in life, when I was in primary school, in my younger years, we had sports day, so you'd have like first, second, third.
Yes.
When I got to the end of my years, we didn't have winners anymore because we didn't want to make people upset. And I think in life you're going to have winners and losers. And if you shelter people from this kind of thing, they're going to get out into the big world and they're going to be hit in the face.
Oh, it's everyone's mental health. You see, you can't have competition. It's very bad for your mental health.
I don't completely disagree with the opinions being given here. I actually think a little bit of competition isn't a bad thing. A little bit of healthy competition, it's a good thing. Now,
isn't Kendall's point right, which is life is competitive?
Life is competitive, and we don't want to be anti-competitive. Education, there's a little bit of a caveat to it. I think a nice happy ground might be just give 50% and above the ranking, and everyone 50% or below. Just that's it. Everyone from
you mean
below
write them off?
No, not write them off, but as in just don't give the ranking from 50% below.
Why?
Just so they know they haven't come last in the whole year group. That's what the issue is, isn't it? Who's bottom?
Yeah, but someone has to be last.
True. Do they want to be called out in front of everyone? Maybe
no,
not.
but all right. So you just tell them. You don't have to publish it on a board, but at least you would be sent that to show your ranking compared with other students. And actually,
yeah.
There's a lot. This is David Albufera, who's Emeritus Professor of History at Gonville and Caius College in Cambridge. If competitiveness is seen as dangerous, one might as well bid goodbye to universities such as Cambridge, which should be seeking to identify outstanding excellence and prepare people for a life in a highly competitive world. Douglas Headley, the Professor of Philosophy of Religion at Clare College in Cambridge, said the proposed changes are part of a systematic attack on our world-renowned university culture. There is a real worry here that actually what we're doing is we're mollycoddling young people, and I've seen this in the working world where they come out of university, they think everyone is equal and it's all wonderful, and actually when they go into the working environment they have no idea what's about to hit them.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I think when people go to university, they go to try and get the best grades possible, but if you're saying, oh well, we're not going to tell you if you've come last, how's that going to mentally prepare someone when they go for a job and they don't get the job?
Yeah, maybe you don't tell them that you didn't get the job.
I think that's stupid.
I mean, there is a serious point here, though, isn't there?
There is.
Which is that Oxford and Cambridge is meant to be the best of the best, the brightest of the brightest, and so therefore competition is intrinsic in that.
I guess you can split this out, right? There's a public and a private image to what your grades are. Privately, I think you should be given what you've got.
Okay.
Privately.
What about the other 50% that you said that you weren't going to
I'm actually going almost one step further than you in another sense. I'm saying publicly you should be actually rewarding the people at the top and giving the top 50%. Here you are, you're the top 50%, well done. And the bottom 50%, no one else knows if they're bottom or 51st.
All right.
So it's a nice equal compromise.
I think you've changed your mind. Let's talk about mobile phones very quickly before we finish. So the leader of the UK's largest teaching union has called for a statutory ban on mobile phones in schools to ease the pressure on parents, teachers and head teachers. This is Daniel Kebede, who is General Secretary of the National Education Union, warned that young children had access to hardcore pornography on their phones that was damaging to both boys and girls. Schools in England were given non-statutory guidance under the Conservative government last year, intended to stop the use of phones during the school day. My reading of this at the moment is that it's up to the schools and the heads to decide how they implement the policy, and that many heads have decided, right, no phones in school, you turn them off the minute you come into school in the morning. Now, what Daniel Kebede wants to do is to make this statutory, so the government basically legislates saying no phones in schools. Is that the right thing to do?
I would agree. I think they are a massive distraction. When I was in secondary school, you know, everyone was on the phones, even in lessons and stuff. People still are at college. It's a massive issue.
In lessons?
Yeah.
So what are the teachers doing?
Well, they'll say, like, put your phone away, but no one really ever would listen.
They never listened?
Not really.
So therefore, do you think it's
They
up
were
to...
very soft.
Is it up... Clearly. So is it up to the teachers to enforce, or is it up to government?
I think that a government legislation, I think that would be a good thing. But I think people are still going to try and break the rules as much as they can because, you know, like even like if you're in school and your phone buzzes in your pocket, you're going to check it.
Okay.
And I think
what about in my draconian world? I'm going to make you check your phone in the minute you come into school. I'm going to put them in a big basket. You can't have it till the end of the day.
I think that would be a good thing.
Okay, you're on my side.
At first, when I read the headline, I thought, yeah, I agree, there should be a ban. I think it's just an obvious natural reaction. The trouble is, it's actually implementing it that's the real issue. There's a concealment issue, which is if people go bringing them in, there's a ban at the start, I'll give you my rubbishy phone and I'll keep my good one in the pocket. Now, I left school probably just before the infiltration of smartphones coming in, so I kind of haven't got a hands-on experience of it, but I would say whatever the rule is, it needs to be consistent at schools. I mean, we had a prime example talking outside about your sister, where one school has one rule, one school has a different one. I mean, if you go to your football on a Saturday and you say, oh yeah, by the way, in my school, we allow phones. Oh, we don't. I mean, that inconsistency just drives people to push the boundaries straight away, as soon as they go back into school.
So is it up to the heads, or so you want government to intervene?
I don't know what the approach should be, and I think there needs to be more research done on it, but I do think there should be some form of legislation that makes it consistent for schools, so that at least everyone's playing by the same rules.
It's great.
Whether it's a drop box outside each class, maybe, make it a little bit more even, I don't know, but...
It's fascinating, actually. Thank you very much to both of you this morning, Kendall Harper-Reyes and also Adam Dale, and that was this morning's Future Politics panel.
The Future Politics panel.
Right, time for a break. After the break, everyone's favourite royal correspondent, Rupert Bell, will be joining me. We're going to be talking about the King being in Italy recently. Also, Prince Harry, of course, being in Ukraine, his court case. We're going to be talking about all of that. That's all still to come here on Weekend Breakfast. A very good morning to you.
But the idea that in our politics at the moment we are obsessing about a fictional drama series, I think tells you all you need to know about our political class not actually facing up to the reality of the problem. I mean, I'll give props actually to the leader of the Conservative Party, Kenny Badenoch, who said, no, I haven't watched it and I don't need to watch it to understand the problems of Britain. It's a fictional series. I don't need to watch it any more than I need to watch Casualty to understand what's going on in the National Health Service.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, 8:51, Sunday, April the 13th. Lots of messages coming in. This is Penny. My granddaughter is 18. Climate is important, but she wants a job. And this, we should all sort out the other stuff before our tiny effect on climate. It's lovely to hear Kendall, a student with a very grown-up lady indeed. Hi, David. In such cases as Lee Rigby, where there is no doubt of their crime, the death penalty should be applied, the same as this Manchester bomber, as we're paying for them to be schooled, to go to gym, they're fed, they're warm, which some people in this country simply cannot afford. David, I agree with Kendall. I'm a Reform member. I'm most unhappy that Farage has not supported Tommy Robinson. The death penalty is too final if a mistake is made. Putting them offshore is a much better punishment. Ed Miliband is insane, as net zero is based on a model, not facts, and will destroy the United Kingdom. Labour get a 1 from me, as they've alienated most of the country with their ill-thought-out, knee-jerk reaction government. Keep all those messages coming in, please. But now it's time for Rupert's World Roundup.
Rupert's Royal Roundup.
Good morning, Rupert.
Good morning, David.
How are we? How are we?
Very good, thank you. Loving the sunny weather and just all good. All good in the Cotswolds.
Excellent. Now, there's a wonderful picture of the King and the Queen, or actually a number of papers. They're standing resplendently at the top of the steps on the plane with the cipher, the royal cipher on one side, the Union flag on the other. I mean, the trip to Italy has been a roaring success.
I think it has, but you obviously Harry seemed to have taken all the headlines away because they go there, but Harry being in town becomes the story. You can't get away from it. So there will be a degree of frustration, I think, within royal circles that yet once again Harry and Meghan have found a way to upstage them. He came over for the court case, which he didn't need to. Then he goes off to Ukraine. But you'd have to say it was a success. The Queen, it was their 20th wedding anniversary during the visit. And obviously, he spoke in Italian as well to both houses of Parliament within Italy. So, terrific performance, PR perspective, and actually exercising once again the element of soft power that he can do that. And he obviously loves Italy. And the sort of culture and the history, and you really got that sense. And then the Queen gave an interview saying, dream on, about him slowing down, which he's 76, and as he keeps battling through cancer, the better he gets, the more determined he is to work as hard as ever, which is because he feels he lets people down if he's not out and about and doing what he's supposed to be doing, which is serving this country.
I mean, my setup producer, you know Gabriella, she's Italian, and she was so impressed with the way the King and the Queen behaved in Italy.
Well, I think Italians, yes, it's, they used to have a monarchy back in the day, but it's not something they have now. But there is a great link. We know Italy and Britain, we all, love going to Italy. There is a link between the two. We, as the King made reference in his speech, we have played fast and loose with Italian cuisine at times, but which I thought was which is true. Italians are appalled at the way we have spaghetti bolognese, and what they think of our version of lasagna, God only knows. But anyway, the fact is, from a PR perspective, I think it was a success. But as I say, Harry coming back for his court case, then he goes to Ukraine when he's coming to this country complaining about security, and next minute he's off to Ukraine, and I believe it was for Invictus Games, which is fine, meeting wounded servicemen and women in Ukraine, which is perfectly laudable. But in terms of security, that's a nightmare. So once again, there's a sort of strange sort of pattern of events that Harry sort of engineers. And then he now comes out with an interview saying he was forced out of this country. Well, if you look at the history, again, we've got into recollections may vary territory. There's once, he said one thing in Spare, and now he's saying the polar opposite, which a former Home Office member is saying, well, this is just not true what he's saying. So at the moment, Harry saying is again creating problems for himself, because the stories he tells, I think he's forgetting what stories he's told in the past, and actually That's an accusation that's often levelled at Meghan as well, who will rewrite history to suit.
What is driving Prince Harry?
I think he's just bitter and twisted, and he just can't see. He thinks he's entitled to be treated differently to everyone else. I think this is the problem. He doesn't, the rest of the royal family just get on with it. Yes, he's no longer a working royal, and he says this is even more important to him about his security beef than anything he's had with the media. Well, I think he would never come here without some level of security, and as they've always said, we'll review it case by case, working on what intelligence we got. We're not going to leave him high and dry. I'm still convinced it's a convenient excuse for Meghan to say, I'm not coming to this country.
Yes, I would agree. And also, you're right about the hypocrisy. So you go from saying, I demand some sort of state protection. The next minute, you're in the middle of an active war zone.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the problem. And you think, OK, Invictus Games is extremely important to him, and,
I get that, but he was sitting in Ukraine with a top saying Invictus Games. I thought that was at the height of bad taste.
Well, I don't necessarily think so, because I might disagree with you there, because the Invictus Games is a very laudable
I agree with
initiative. And I think for him to go there, because bearing in mind the next Invictus Games is taking place in this country, and we as a nation have been very supportive of Ukraine. So as a result, I think understand. But actually, to do it when you're complaining about security, when you're putting yourself then in the front line of a war zone, I find, again, this is what people are questioning. What's going on here? Is this country not safer than Ukraine?
One would think so. Just finally, and we've only got a minute left, but just in terms of the relationship between William and Harry, I imagine that's pretty irreparable now.
I think it is, and they've got never say never, as we're saying with all these things, but I think the sense of frustration from William, and not just William, I think the rest of the royal family is, oh my goodness me, I think he's just rudderless at the moment, Harry. While his wife is plying her trade, selling this, doing that, Instagram podcast, which was dreadful, that's the point. She's busy, whereas he at the moment seems to only have work around court cases and sort of feeling, as I say, rudderless, not sure where his life is heading.
Yeah, Rupert, always good to talk to you. Thank you very much, Rupert Bell there, our royal correspondent, talking about Prince Harry upstaging the King and Queen on what was an incredibly successful visit, I would say, to Italy. Rupert, thanks ever so much. Still plenty more to come on the programme. Don't go anywhere. After the break, we'll talk about all the big stories. We'll also talk about the week in politics. Who's had a good week? Who's had a bad week? The week ahead, and who should have a week off? That's next here on Weekend Breakfast.
We've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino?
Right? Yeah, okay. Rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Shoplifting years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its two front legs and waved them around. and then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson being attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, cripes, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as a family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you, just after 9 o'clock now on Sunday, April the 13th. I'm David Bull, and this is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning. Great news for you. It's International Plant Appreciation Day. What? Yes, it's a perfect day to bring home a new houseplant. Also, to spend time with those already in your home. Now, apparently, plants like it when you talk to them. They also like classical music, apparently.
Daffodil, heartsease and phlox, meadowsweet and lady smocks, gentian, lupin and tall hollyhocks, roses, foxgloves, snowdrops, forget-me-nots in an English country garden.
Right, yeah, I haven't heard that for years. Also tonight, it's the London Eurovision party. It's where current and former contestants showcase their songs in front of fans and international media. Now, you may not know this, but it's come round again. Yes, in just a month's time, Eurovision begins again on the 13th of May in Basel in Switzerland. As Terry Wogan said, it seems it comes around every 6 weeks. Yes, so London Eurovision party tonight.
But soon you will find that there comes a time for making your mind up.
Oh, gosh, I remember that very well indeed. Bugs Fizz there, making your mind. I feel like I'm doing a different show now. Also, it's International Scrabble Day, a day that celebrates the popular board game. Now, the day was actually picked to honour the creator, Alfred Mosher Butts, who was actually born on this day. Amazing. So, happy International Scrabble Day.
We're playing Scrabble. We are obsessed. It's been 3 hours now and I'm getting depressed. 'Cause all I've got is consonants and all you have is vowels.
That's so true. It's so true. The most frustrating game, Scrabble, and actually Dr. Raj and I were talking about whether we do a medical Scrabble. You can only use medical words. Anyway, let's move on to this hour's Fascinating Facts.
Today's Fascinating Facts.
So here they are. 1935, Imperial Airways and Qantas inaugurated their London to Australia air service on this day in 1935. You may remember this. On this day in 1992, Neil Kinnock resigned as Labour Party leader. He blamed the Conservative-backed press for his party's defeat at the general election. And on this day in 2014, there was research carried out to look at what it meant to be British. And apparently, Britishness was defined as the monarchy, the BBC and pubs. I wonder if that's changed, with William Shakespeare, the House of Commons and our weather topping the list. And those are this hour's and today's Fascinating Facts.
Weekend mornings we're taking flight. With David Bull, everything feels right. Weekend breakfast, shining like the sun.
Good morning, good morning. Lots going on in the papers this morning. If you are just joining us, this is Weekend Breakfast. I'm David Bull. The time is just after 9 o'clock. We talked about the emergency recall of Parliament, the legislation that went through at record pace yesterday through the Commons, the Lords, the amendments made to it, the royal assent that was given at 6 o'clock to keep open the Scunthorpe blast furnaces. And then, of course, it's transpired there is no fuel for the blast furnaces, which is being brought into the country. Well, the front page of the Sunday Sunday Times today says the Navy is on alert to escort fuel in the steel crisis to keep the blast furnaces open. Now, a lot of questions I have about this is how come Jonathan Reynolds has only just realised that there might be a crisis brewing at that plant? The theatrics behind all of this, of course, bringing back members of Parliament during the Easter recess so that the government looks like it's in control of what is going on. I think you have to question that as well. Also, a long-term strategy here doesn't seem to have been discussed, so there was no talk about, or there was sort of talk of nationalisation, but sort of kicking it down the road. I question that, and I wonder whether it should have been brought under public control yesterday during the parliamentary legislation. Anyway, let's move on to the Sunday Telegraph. Jihadist attacks 3 jail guards. This is Hashim Abeidi, who somehow managed to get hold of cooking oil, implements, and then injured prison officers. Lots of questions, and I'm asking this morning this question: do you think it's time to reconsider the death penalty in this country? 0344 499 1000. The Mail, this is pretty jaw-dropping as well. There's some evidence, according to the Mail, that's come to light showing that actually the evidence given by Dr. Ravi Jayaram may not be quite what it seems. They seem to have found an email which sort of suggests that the evidence that was presented isn't the whole evidence for Lucy Letby. And the question is then, as the Mail says, bombshell email that could free Lucy Letby. The Sunday Express this morning talks about the King and Queen's visit to Italy. As I said, it's a rather brilliant photo, this. The cipher, the royal cipher on the right-hand side of that picture, the Union flag on the left. Dream on! Camilla had to laugh when she was asked if the King might take it easy. Lots of messages coming in. Barry says, good morning, David. I think the King's time would be better spent travelling around the United Kingdom and finding out what is wrong here and why many of us are so angry. In my opinion, he's totally out of touch. Heather says that Charles has let the people down by prioritising Islam over Christianity. No longer my king. Thank you for that, Heather. Good morning, Dr. David. This is Massimo from Great Bowden. Good morning, Massimo. Great show as always. Thank you very much. We are unable to even deport some of the worst criminals, let alone put them to death, although I am for the death penalty on these sort of crimes. I don't think the wet, soggy judiciary we have presiding over it would allow it. Keep those messages coming in. It's a really difficult one, this, because we're talking about the death penalty with Hashim Abeidi, and at the same time, in the same breath, saying, well, hang on a minute, is Lucy Letby innocent, according to the Mail on Sunday? So let me know your thoughts on all of that, please. But now it's time to turn to the week in politics. This is the section where we look back at the political world in the last week and ask them 3 or 4 simple questions. Firstly, who's had a good week? Who's had a bad week? What does the week ahead look like? And quite frankly, who should have a week off? Joining me now, Kevin Schofield, political editor at the Huffington Post UK. Good morning to you.
Hello there, David. How are you?
Yeah, all right, thanks very much. Can we start, actually, just talking about this emergency recall of Parliament? I have so many questions about this, because suddenly Jonathan Reynolds says, oh, by the way, it transpired on Thursday that we had a problem at Scunthorpe. I'm going to have an emergency recall of Parliament. And so suddenly all the MPs are summoned back, the theatrics of the whole thing behind it. They rush it through. The Prime Minister then releases a letter saying, I've done this to support the steel industry in this country. I mean, all of this just smacks, there's something not right going on here.
Well, interestingly, I got a message. I was just checking my phone there. I got a message last Sunday from someone in the industry or close to the industry saying, look, this could be the point of no return this week. The government will have to consider nationalisation this week. Now, that was 7 days ago.
Wow.
So that kind of indicates that this was in the ether. You know, this was around being discussed at a high level. And it is a little bit surprising that it took until Friday for the government to apparently be seized of the urgency of this problem and then recall Parliament and everything that flowed from that. And clearly these things just don't happen overnight. This has been bubbling away in the background for quite some time.
So according to the Times this morning, it says it dawned on Reynolds on Thursday the Chinese company wasn't going to accept the offer. Look, there's a much bigger issue here, which is however you slice and dice this, the government was trying to give these incentives to the Chinese company, but ultimately we would be the only G7 country that was unable to make virgin steel in this country. Now, you can't then say the world is an unstable place, we need to build things in this country, have construction projects and not have virgin steel.
No, absolutely, and I think that is why the government decided to act in the way that it did eventually, is that basically the alternative was so much worse. You're right, I think it's the G20, actually. No other country in the G20
that is also true,
would be unable to produce its own steel. Now, Jonathan Reynolds has already been out and about this morning. He's saying that the government made a very generous offer indeed to British Steel's owners, but it became very clear that they had no interest in effectively keeping the plant open. And if these blast furnaces were allowed to shut down, then it is literally impossible to restart them again, which would have basically spelt the end of the British steel industry, which is why the government eventually, as I say, decided to act.
OK, let's move on. This is where I ask you about who's had a good week. So in your opinion, who do you think has actually had a good week?
Well, this one was pretty difficult, actually, because
yeah, I would agree.
Many of them have had good weeks. At a push, and it is all relative, I thought Kemi Badenoch has had a relatively good week, considering the difficult start that she's made to being Conservative leader. Now, the reason I say that is that she won quite a lot of plaudits for an interview that she gave, in which she was given a hard time for not having watched Adolescence. It became a bit of a viral clip, actually. She was really interrogated.
So just to recap, this is a Netflix drama, isn't it?
Yeah.
Adolescence, which talks without ruining the plot. But Keir Starmer has made quite heavy work of this.
Yeah, so this is it's a drama, usually a Netflix drama, about a young boy who's accused of killing a girl. And it's caused a huge public policy debate. There's been calls for it to be shown in schools, broadcast in Parliament, all about toxic masculinity. What does it mean about social media? Now, Kemi Badenoch has been very upfront and said she has not watched it. She says she's too busy to be watching Netflix dramas, but she knows all about the issues involved. And she got a really, really difficult time in this interview on the BBC a few days ago. But to her credit, she fought her corner very well, and actually it came across, even people who criticise Kemi Badenoch normally said, look, she has a point here. Just because this programme is a very well-produced programme, and it's obviously been very popular and will probably win a lot of awards, it's not a documentary. It is a drama at the end of the day. It's a made-up story. So, you know, our politicians shouldn't be using dramas as a basis for public policy. And I thought that she fought her corner pretty well, and as I say, won plaudits from some quite unusual corners. So I think in that context, she's had a pretty good week.
Can I just ask you, in terms of Kemi Badenoch, do you think she's actually starting to find her feet? I was looking at the polling, the latest polling. There's no doubt the Conservative Party is still polling third.
They are, and they're going to get a real whooping in the local elections in May. And Kemi Badenoch herself has more or less admitted that. They've got something like 900-odd seats up for grabs that they're defending, and they're going to lose an awful lot of them, primarily to Reform UK, I think. So it's going to be a really rocky few weeks for her. I think she's going to be coming under an awful lot of pressure internally. I think a lot of Conservative MPs will be wanting to know what her plan is. She'll have been in position for 6 months, and she has not turned around the Conservatives' fortunes at all. If anything, they may well even have gone backwards a bit. So yeah, she's under an awful lot of pressure. She's maybe doing slightly better than she was at the beginning, but it's a very low bar, and I think she has to do an awful lot better.
And just in terms of the recall of Parliament yesterday, how did Kemi Badenoch fare there?
Well, actually, you know, I watched a bit of it yesterday, and I almost had to rethink my my claim that she'd had a good week, because she got up at one point to say that she had, as business secretary, she had a deal in place to save British Steel when the Conservatives were still in power, and then when Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary, said, well, there was no deal on the table when I came to office. She then had to back down a bit and admit that she hadn't actually got the deal agreed, and she didn't really cover herself in glory. So again, as I say, it's almost like there's one step forward and 2 steps back for Kevin Badenoch right now.
OK, so who's had a bad week?
So the bad again is Donald Trump. I think it's impossible to say anything other than that. He's had to climb down pretty embarrassingly over the tariffs. He talked tough when he announced the tariffs at that famous Rose Garden press conference a week or so ago, with his board of tariffs. They were going to be in permanently, he said. That this was all about bringing manufacturing back to America, bringing billions and billions of dollars in tax revenue, and lo and behold, he's had to roll back, slash these tariffs back to the 10% basically across the board. Apart from China, he's still going hard on China. And then yesterday, we find out that even the Chinese tariffs won't apply to smartphones and other electronic devices, because he realises that was going to massively push up the price for American consumers.
But of course, there was huge lobbying, wasn't there, going on by all the tech giants in the United States, like Apple, for example, saying, well, actually, the cost of an iPhone is going to triple.
Well, exactly. Now, the whole argument that Donald Trump made during the American election campaign was that the tariffs would be paid by the countries the tariffs are imposed upon. But in actual fact, as we know, these tariffs actually end up being paid by the consumer, because the cost is just passed on to the person who's going to be buying these products at the end of the line. So Donald Trump has obviously listened to his advisors eventually and has had to climb down. So, yeah, it's been another pretty ignominious week for him, I think.
I mean, it's extraordinary just watching the stock markets, the way that they basically, the markets open, they then drop significantly. Trump says this is going to be a beautiful day. It's all part of the plan. I mean, I don't know how much of this is bluster, how much he actually believes. Also, I mentioned this earlier, he's kind of playing 2D chess on a 3D chessboard.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've seen people even say that he's playing 4D chess. He's on a whole different plane from the rest of us.
Yeah.
We don't see things in the way that he does. I think all the warnings thus far about his tariff policy have come to fruition. And this is something as well that he has believed for 40 years. You can go back looking at his days as a businessman. Before he entered politics, he was still very much in favour of tariffs. He's now finally been able to implement those policies, and it would appear, thus far anyway, that they've just completely blown up in his face.
Well, of course, he says that everyone's queuing up at his door to do deals with the United States. I know the United Kingdom is desperately trying to get a deal away with the US. It's also changing the relationship, and they're also saying, well, we need to have a closer relationship with the EU, but we shall see. Let's have a look at who should we keep an eye on this week, in your opinion.
Well, I mentioned him briefly earlier, but Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary, is now officially the busiest man in government. Now that
he's now making steel.
He's now in charge of British Steel, which in itself you would think would be a full-time job. But he's also got to, as you mentioned there, try to get this economic deal with America over the line. He's been flying back and forth to Washington to try and get the deal done. Thus far, unsuccessfully. I spoke to one person in number 10 at the tail end of last week who thought it was more likely to be weeks or months rather than hours or days before this deal is done. Although, who knows, with Donald Trump, he could wake up tomorrow morning and decide, you know what, I'm going to sign this deal with the United Kingdom. Probably unlikely, but you can't rule it out. So, yeah, Jonathan Reynolds, I think he's definitely one to keep an eye on. Parliament is now gone back into recess again, but there won't be a holiday, an Easter holiday for him, because, as you see, he's now running British Steel, as well as I say, try to get this deal done.
Extraordinary stuff. OK, so loads of messages coming in here. The fact that a prisoner could burn and attack guards is just another example of failing country. The list is getting longer. Loads of people just messaging now. They don't even send a lot of these criminals to prison, so they'll never bring back the death penalty and so on. So just in terms of Trump, though, how much of this do you think is calculated, and how much of this is part of a much more strategic plan, or is it just sort of plucked out of thin air?
Well, I think it's part of a plan insofar as he is doing what he said he would do. You know, these aren't policies that have just been plucked out of thin air. He's been saying for quite some time, particularly on tariffs, but on other things that he's done, all the executive orders that he's signed, these are promises that he made during the election campaign, and he said he has a mandate to do them. So there is a plan. Now, whether you agree with the plan or not is a completely different kettle of fish. But yeah, it does though already start to look like it's creaking at the seams. It looks as though those around him are at each other's throats. We saw Elon Musk criticising Peter Navarro quite publicly on X, using pretty unflattering language to describe him, all about tariffs. So, yeah, it reminds me an awful lot of his first term in office, when you remember he went through officials just day in, day out. There was just a revolving door in the White House, people coming and going, and it's starting to look a bit like that already. And he's only been in power for not even 3 months yet.
It's really interesting. I was listening to an article this morning about Trump trying to waive the right to have actually more parliamentary terms, to become the US president for a third term. And they're trying to look at ways around that. I mean, his methodology is extremely unusual. Also, finally, if I may just ask you, who do you think should have a week off?
Well, I'm told that someone who is looking to have 2 or 3 days off next week is actually Keir Starmer. Now, I don't think that has been finalised yet. It certainly was the plan, although things can change very quickly. And I think he's probably not a bad idea for him to maybe take a step back and take a deep breath, because he's not had the easiest or the best start to life in number 10. That's 9 months now, pushing 10 months actually, since he became Prime Minister. Time flies when you're enjoying yourself, doesn't it? So yeah, I think a few days off might not be a bad idea, so you can maybe come back refreshed and who knows, might start making a better job of things.
Well, very well said. Really good to talk to you, Kevin, as usual. Kevin Schofield there, political editor at HuffPost UK. Andrew is on the line from Hertfordshire. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning. The person that should take a few days off, Jess Phillips, look herself in the mirror. She let the country down, her party down, and she actually should look in the eyes of her daughter and say, Mummy has let herself down, and resign. Anyway, back to capital punishment.
Oh, yes.
It's not capital punishment. It's not the death penalty. It is capital punishment. Death penalty sells newspapers. It's the wrong expression.
All right. Capital punishment.
When you have a good society, you don't need capital punishment. What people do is they hide behind the fact they put the problem, i.e. the murderer, in prison. And everybody has this expression, yeah, he's going to get a hard time in prison. That's because we'd far rather put someone in prison and let other people torture them than deal with the problem. You have to kill the people that kill. There's no other way round it. And once you've done it, perhaps 50 or 60, then people get the message. Now, I know there are lots of arguments the other way, but we've got to a point now where what you don't realise is in prison, the Human Rights Act applies to all prisoners.
Yep.
So a lawyer will make sure that that individual gets access to rest and relaxation. That's why they get their own environment, their own cooking utensils. That's what's happened here. He should have been hung by the neck, burned, and his ashes thrown away, never given back to the families. That's the end of it. Move
Okay,
on.
and what about in this, I agree it's pretty cut and dried. We know that he was responsible, and also for those families who face that shocking event, then the punishment has to be severe. But in the same breath, we're also talking about Lucy Letby in the Mail today, the bombshell email that could free Lucy Letby. It looks like the evidence that was given isn't quite what it turned out to be in that case. So are you concerned about miscarriages of justice?
Where the evidence is there, follow it through. In relation to Lucy Letby, I know it's become a trendy lefty North London thing to talk about her as if she's not guilty. Why don't you sit down with some of the families and have a chat with them?
Well, hang on a minute, but we have to go on evidence here, and it looks like Ravi Jayaram was saying one thing in his testimony, and there seems to be an email trail that says something quite different.
Okay, as long as you want to cling to that,
No, I don't. I'm just reporting what's in the paper.
Okay, you're not reporting a fact because it's just an email. It could have been put together.
Well, emails are facts.
Yeah, if you've got the POP server, you've got when it was sent, and it's primary documentary evidence because it's not been tampered with. Do you know that?
I don't know this. I'm reporting what it says in the Mail. But if the Mail knows that, and that is what they're reporting, then there is an issue, isn't there?
No, yeah, we're scrappy. I wish I had a glass of wine with you. Until I see the primary documentary evidence, the conviction's sound.
I don't know how you can be so confident.
What do you mean confident? That's how the justice system works.
I understand that, but obviously they're appealing that verdict, aren't they?
They got together some trendy lefties from around the world, none of whom...
I don't think that's true. I think they've got together world experts.
None of whom could write a prescription in this country.
No, well, hang on a minute. So Raj Basu, Dr. Raj, who was here earlier, was saying actually those people who testified in the original case weren't the top of their tree. And in fact, there are many people here who are then being quoted saying that actually this is based on a very dodgy evidence that was given.
That is playing to the narrative. Any of those children, are they coming back?
That's not the point. It's whether she's actually guilty.
Okay, so that's not the point. So the parents don't count. No,
that's not what I'm saying. But you can't then. You have to be sure that your conviction is right and just.
I'm 100% sure that.
How do you know that? You weren't there. You haven't seen the evidence.
No, good objective questioning. The jury made a decision based on the evidence that was presented to them. The conviction is sound.
So the evidence presented to them at that time, there now transpires, according to the Mail, there is other evidence that wasn't then put in front of that jury.
That's because in the process of law, what is exchanged between the two counsels, it is agreed what will be presented to the jury. That's not the Crown prosecution's fault. They would have shared that with the opposition. So what's presented to the jury is agreed by the barristers and the judge.
Understood. And in terms of the lawyers are now amassing a case, they want a retrial. What happens if she isn't actually guilty?
What happens is she is.
Well, then the conviction is sound.
Exactly. So all I think about this is I think about the parents.
No, I understand that, of course, but you also have to make sure that justice is right and proper.
If that were the case,
yes,
you look across recently what's gone on in relation to people that have come here illegally and have committed crimes. Why is this one so important?
I'm not sure I follow that. Every case is important.
Okay, so you've got people that enter the country illegally that have committed crimes.
Yes.
Who've been let off because it doesn't seem to matter. But this
that's not the point. They use the ECHR to get round those convictions. That's why.
Yeah, but this one is important because apparently in America, someone started to talk about it on a website. That's the only reason it got prominence.
I'm not sure that's true, but I could talk to you all day. Andrew, thanks ever so much for calling in. Andrew from Hertfordshire there. Let me know your thoughts on that. We'll go to a break now. After the break, Davis Fang will be here with all the latest tech news. That's all still to come. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
But the idea that in our politics at the moment we are obsessing about a fictional drama series, I think tells you all you need to know about our political class not actually facing up to the reality of the problem. I mean, I'll give props actually to the leader of the Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch, who said, no, I haven't watched it and I don't need to watch it to understand the problems of Britain. It's a fictional series. I don't need to watch it any more than I need to watch Casualty to understand what's going on in the National Health Service.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Wow, just before the break, I was talking to Andrew and I was trying to make sense of what he was saying, and many of you have now joined in the conversation. Hi, David, great show. This is Ed. Andrew has completely let himself down. He's not listening to the valid points you're trying to make. He's made his mind up. He's not listening to the important point. Is she guilty or not? And that was the point I was trying to say, which is actually, is the evidence overwhelming? And if it turns out that actually evidence is there that wasn't submitted to court, which proves that actually she did call for help, that exonerates her, then she isn't guilty. And we're talking also about bringing back the death penalty. Massimo says, wow, I really hope Andrew never becomes a judge. Also, this is another one. Stephen Ashton said, just a thought, David, if we had the death penalty, then Lucy Letby would no longer be here. Also, this is interesting as well. I was talking about parliamentary recall, saying, hang on a minute, how did the business secretary suddenly realise on Thursday there was a problem with British Steel, then recalls Parliament, then great theatrics, and of course then finally they pass the bill and it goes to Royal Assent and all the rest of it. David, could someone actually look at how much that recall on Saturday actually cost the taxpayer? This could have been done during normal parliamentary hours. I totally agree with that as well. David, this is Don in Chelmsford. Good morning. The fact that a prisoner could burn and attack guards is just another example of our failing country. The list is getting longer. David, this is Tracy. They don't even send a lot of these criminals to prison, so they will never, ever bring back the death penalty. Keep all of those messages coming in. Should we think about the death penalty again? Bringing it back into this country, 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well, at talkTV. But now it's time for something different. It's now time for Tech Rundown.
Tech Rundown.
Davis fan, good morning.
Good morning, David. I'm very glad to be back.
Oh, it's lovely to see you, yes. So lots of tech news, actually. I was reading through some of your stories. Now, should we start on the big bandwagon that everyone is jumping on?
I think we should.
Come on, then. So tell us what this is about.
So if you've been anywhere on the internet over, like, the past 2 weeks, let's say, it's sort of impossible to avoid this sort of... I describe it as the Barbie doll trend. I'm sure we've all seen it. So basically, you can use an app like ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot, and you could put in a prompt and turn yourself into a plastic Barbie doll.
Right.
Now, I believe that this is very popular. It's even spread around this office.
Has it?
Like yesterday, you know, there were images of you and other people going around. I do believe that we've got one of you coming up.
Have we?
But yeah, so it's everywhere on the internet.
So Tech Op Dave did a very good one of me. Oh, this is a new one.
Yes.
Oh, that's nothing like me, but it is the right shirt.
In that famous pink shirt.
Oh, I get a stethoscope. What have I got there? Apparently that's probably some sort of blood pressure thing. And why have I got a megaphone?
I don't know. It's what ChatGPT believes.
Oh, it gave me that.
That represents you.
Oh, that's very kind. Yeah, it's everywhere, isn't it? But there was also an article saying everyone is jumping on the AI doll trend, but also concerns. Are there concerns about it? Because my understanding is you put in parameters into ChatGPT or whatever, and you're basically sharing a lot lot of data, aren't you?
Yeah, data privacy is definitely one of the concerns. However, another one of the really big concerns that a lot of people are talking about this week are the environmental ones. Because what a lot of people don't realise is that AI uses a lot of power. For example, people are saying that so the electricity to power the data centres that do this AI, at the moment, it uses more electricity than 117 separate countries. So that is a lot.
Say that again.
So 117 countries at the moment individually use less power than all of the AI data centers put together. So that is sort of insane. And that's set to double within 5 years.
But don't worry, we've got windmills that we're putting in and tidal barriers and, you know, all the rest of it. We're going to live by candlelight.
Yeah, and it's not just the use of AI that uses a lot of power. For example, just training the AI uses a lot of power. Training the previous GPT-4 used 42 gigawatt hours, which is equivalent to almost 30,000 homes for one day. And if you create a 6-second video using AI, that's enough power to charge 8 mobile phones. So this person actually describes it as, so every time you create an AI image, you kill a tree. Obviously, that's not true, but that's sort of the sentiment that people are saying at the moment.
I think it's really difficult for people to realise that all this technology actually does need huge amounts of energy. But again, I then would question government, saying, why are we not actually putting us in a position where we create cheap energy? Because obviously, if AI is advancing at the speed it is, we will need more energy.
Yeah, that's one of the big concerns in India at the moment, because they really do want to hop on the AI bandwagon. But the only place where they've got cheap energy, well, you know, they sort of need to power houses and, you know, and factories and stuff like that. So AI is probably not on the top of where the energy should be put into.
Also, is there a concern about this, about copywriting data? Because, of course, ChatGPT, all of this stuff is using technology, or it's basically borrowing stuff from the internet, and there are real issues over copyright, I guess.
Yeah, there really are, and we are especially seeing this already. For example, the BBC, if you go on ChatGPT and ask it to, you know, sort of translate a BBC article, it won't do that because the BBC no longer allows AI to sort of scan that content. And so essentially, I believe that actually, this is quite interesting. I got an email recently. This company, this AI company, wanted to use all of the videos that I've ever made to create an AI version of myself, and they were offering a lot of money to do that.
Did you say yes?
I didn't. That sounds too scary for me. But essentially,
what's the downside?
People are starting to realise that this data, this content that you create, whether that's you know, like inadvertent, or if you write for a living, or if you create videos, it's worth something. And if someone were to, let's say, license your likelihood, that could have real repercussions in the future.
So if they, say, cloned you or copied you or made an AI version of you, then they could, in the future, make videos without you.
Precisely. And we're already seeing this with celebrities. There's a lot of scammy ads on the internet at the moment using the likely, you know, the look of certain celebrities, and using the AI versions of them to sell various dodgy products. And that's not something that really should continue.
No. We have to go to a break. In the break, Dave's going to send me the picture of myself because I'm going to keep that one. Davis, thanks for the moment. We'll talk about ChatGPT and the Turing test threshold. We'll talk about iPhones and all the rest of it. Lots more tech coming up. The time 9:39. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
9:41, Sunday, April the 13th. I'm in conversation with Davis Phone. We're talking about all things tech. Now, let's talk about this. This is just blowing my mind. The Turing test threshold, right? Can you explain what that is, what ChatGPT is now doing, and does this mean some sort of sentience to what is going on?
Yeah, so the news is that the latest version of ChatGPT 4.5, is the first commercially available AI to have passed the Turing test.
Right, now, so what is the Turing test?
The Turing test was proposed by Alan Turing, who basically is the father of modern computing in 1950. And he was very forward-thinking because there was no AI back then, but he still asked the questions, can machines think? So he created what's now called the Turing test. And the test is where you'll have one sort of human assessor, and then there's two hidden test subjects. There's one human and one machine, and they're only allowed to type or write to the human assessor.
Okay.
And then the human, judging by the quality of the conversation, has to work out who is machine or AI and who is human. And then this is the first ever time that we've seen that the AI has passed the test. Actually, the details, the results are quite astonishing. Apparently, 73% of the human assessors thought that ChatGPT was indeed human, and that's compared to 21% of the previous version. So that is a massive increase over there.
And what has allowed that to happen? Is it just the progress of technology? Is it the way they answer? Is it the language the machines are using?
Yeah, it's a very specific way that they've sort of passed this test. So if you go on ChatGPT and other similar sort of chat programs, you can sort of tell it how you want it to sound. And what they did in this test is ask ChatGPT to create a very relatable persona, an introverted young person who's fluent in internet slang. And I'm guessing that some of the assessors were slightly older and didn't quite understand the internet slang. And so they assumed that, all of these words, like skibbity and stuff like that, were indeed from a human. And so it's sort of a mixture. It's the AI sort of knowing how to speak like a human.
Wow.
Rather than sort of...
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Then you get into the realms of whether the Turing test is actually measuring intelligence, or is it just measuring the ability of the machine to pass the test?
Yeah, I think we can clearly say it's probably not measuring intelligence in itself, rather than the ability to fool people. And this is quite concerning.
But I mean, this is part of sci-fi when I was growing up. The fact is that machines started to achieve sentience.
Yeah, this does feel that way. It does feel like that ChatGPT is almost sentient now. However, obviously, we do know that that's not quite the case. We're not quite there yet.
No. So yesterday, we were talking about this, about the tariffs, Donald Trump, what he's doing, putting the tariffs on all sorts of things, Apple panicking, thinking, well, hang on a minute, this is going to treble the price of iPhones. So Donald Trump has now backed down. That's the latest news on the tariffs that are going to be imposed on things like iPhones. What's the latest in this?
Yeah, so we all heard the news. Donald Trump was proposing 145% tariffs on tech coming from China. Not just tech, but we're talking about tech at the moment. However, if that were to happen, as you said earlier on in the program, we would see a world where an iPhone costs $3,000, a Nintendo costs $1,500. Obviously, that wasn't palatable, and it's sort of impossible to move production over to the US, which is probably Donald Trump's ultimate goal in the span of weeks. Yeah. So what he's done is basically cancelled all of these tariffs for these major computing companies. So iPhones, computers, computer chips as well will no longer face the tariff. And people are saying, actually, because Tim Cook donated $1 million to Donald Trump's inauguration, people are saying that it was the best $1 million ever spent.
Oh, 100%, 100%. Where do you want to go now? Shall we talk about this? This is rather brilliant, the AI shopping app.
Yes.
So this is a brilliant story. So an AI shopping app, as far as I can see, which was basically there, told people that it helped you in terms of checking out when you got to your basket electronically, when you were shopping online. And basically this AI program somehow would make it easier.
Yeah, so basically, if you're a tech startup company, the only way to get sort of investment at the moment is to use AI in your program. Like, just to claim that you've got AI and then instantly you've got investment. That's sort of the landscape we're in at the moment. And so Adam Sanger, who started a shopping app called Nate, created this program where he claimed that instead of, going through the normal checkout process where you have to put in your details, what size of shoe you want, stuff like that, it's all handled by AI.
Wow.
However, there wasn't actually AI.
What?
Instead, it was real people in a call center in the Philippines and Romania doing all of the data entry. So instead of AI...
that's fraud.
Yeah, it really is. And he was charged of fraud.
Right.
And so that actually reminds me of a previous story as well, where Amazon, with their checkout free physical stores, apparently, although there is AI, there's over 1,000 different workers.
So this
in
is
India
whatever it's
checking.
called, Amazon Fresh, which
Yes.
I love. So you go into that shop, you basically put stuff in your basket, you just leave, but it knows what's in your basket.
Yes.
And I thought it was all the cameras that knows automatically what you're buying.
Well, the cameras do know, both AI and also 1,000 people looking at your what you're holding in your hands. So
that's incredible.
Yeah,
that's incredible. Also, let's talk. We've got a couple more to get through. So Samsung has launched a new ball. Is it really called Bally?
It's called Bally. So it was unveiled over 5 years ago, I believe, and then we've seen it at basically every single tech show ever since.
Have we?
We hadn't really known when it would come out, and now we know that it's finally coming out this summer. And basically, it's like this AI ball that follows you
Here we are.
throughout
There's a
the
ball.
house.
That's Bally.
It is so adorable, and
is it?
I think it's adorable. It looks like that you can bounce it around. But the idea is that you can ask it certain things. Like if you're going out for the day, you can ask it if you need an umbrella or not. And if you're bored...
It hasn't got any hands to give you an umbrella.
No, it'll tell you that you need an umbrella. And then it's got a projector as well. So basically, you've got a TV following you everywhere. And this is sort of people are saying this is an alternative to having a pet, which is quite funny because there is a pet in this video.
Yeah.
And so imagine a pet that's actually useful. It's like a new companion.
What is the point of that?
The point is so you can spend your money.
I see.
Yeah.
I mean, interesting. This is a much more interesting story. Final story. This is about airports set to scrap boarding passes and check-ins. So a major travel shake-up. As far as I understand, the last big shake-up in the way that we travel and the way we negotiate an airport happened in the early 2000s, so 25 years ago or thereabouts. But it looks like some major changes are coming. Tell us more.
Yeah, so this is the biggest shake-up in what people are saying is in 50 years. And basically, boarding passes and also check-in will be scrapped and replaced by your phone. So I think we're already sort of halfway there. We're familiar with, doing boarding passes on our phones, and that basically means that you don't have a scrap of paper that you need to protect because they get crumpled almost immediately. However, this is sort of taking it to the next level. Passengers will use something called a journey pass, which is sort of a digital credential thing that's stored on your phone. It replaces your passport as well. So when you go into the airport, you'll get your face scanned, and then that will confirm it's you. It will confirm that, yes, you're ready to board this flight, and then you can proceed into the airport. And if you're worried about data protection...
Yes, I'm worried.
They've thought about this as well. Apparently, they'll delete your data within 15 seconds. I feel this is both exciting and sort of terrifying in a way. I think we need technology in certain places in our lives, like that Samsung ball thing, but not necessarily in others.
This is much more useful, though. The airport is much more useful than a Bally.
Yeah, to be fair, I don't know, I think checkout is already, check-in is basically something that we don't really need anymore, because we already check in with our phones, and then you scan your phone on the machine thing, and then you're already through the gate.
You do the bag drop yourself, don't you? You take but then what happens to your bag tags and stuff like that? Have they thought that through?
I believe that you still need to manually do it, unless if there's a person to help you. So that bit will still...
You know what's going to happen is, particularly older people who can't do this, or if your phone breaks or whatever it is. I mean, if you go to the airport without a boarding pass on your phone at the moment, you get charged exorbitantly anyway. For those people who can't actually use it, and I'm thinking particularly of older people, then this may be a major issue.
Yeah, that's my concern as well, especially now that your passport is on your phone as well. What they're proposing.
What happens if your phone gets nicked?
Precisely, or if your phone dies. We've got major repercussions here.
Well, I was in Alicante Airport and I had my phone stolen in Alicante Airport.
My phone was stolen in Barcelona. I think I've told this before.
There you are. Davis, thanks ever so much. Really good to see you, Davis Fang there, and today's Tech Rundown. We'll take a break. After the break, your calls, thoughts and messages. This is Weekend Breakfast.
But the idea that in our politics at the moment we are obsessing about a fictional drama series, I think tells you all you need to know about our political class not actually facing up to the reality of the problem. I mean, I'll give props actually to the leader of the Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch, who said, no, I haven't watched it and I don't need to watch it to understand the problems of Britain. It's a fictional series. I don't need to watch it any more than I need to watch Casualty to understand what's going on in the National Health Service.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, 9:53 on Sunday, April the 13th. Lots of messages coming in. Hi, David. How on earth does that guy think the parents will feel if Lucy is found to be innocent? We're talking about Lucy Letby there. And be murdered by the state. The guilt they would carry, plus the loss of their child, would be absolutely crushing. That's Helen in Barnet. Jill in Hertfordshire, good morning. Having done jury service myself, I would do everything I could not to do it again. It isn't justice. It's 12 people who make a judgment on whether they like the defendant. Lots of comments as well coming in about that call I did with Andrew earlier on. Lots of other messages coming in. Keep all of these coming in, please, this morning. Let's take a call now. Dave is on the line from Hampshire. Good morning, Dave.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks very much indeed. Gosh, we've spoken about a lot this morning. What do you think? Should we think again and bring back the death penalty?
Well, firstly, I'd like to comment on, was it Andrew who called in?
Yes, Andrew.
You've had a possibly text on. Well, now, firstly, I disagree with him. That's a lefty idea that Lucy Letby is innocent. I mean, she, as you pointed out to him, has had some expert witness contradicting evidence.
Yeah.
So can you imagine capital punishment based on the ineptitude of national health scapegoats, you know, that where the national health has blamed anyone else but for their own failings. That's happened in the past. It's been proven. So she has been made the scapegoat, and then she obviously got sentenced to capital punishment. That would be absolutely absurd. But I do agree with it for terrorists like Al-Baidi and the Southport killer, who are definitely 100% guilty with they've admitted it and there's no doubt.
What about the argument that says then you give them the ultimate closure? They get what they want. They get martyrdom.
Well, yeah, I don't think that's a very strong argument. It's not for them, is it? It's for us. It's to protect us. It's to protect prison officers. It's to protect... what have they got at the moment? Basically, they've got...
Oh, you've disappeared.
And...
Oh, sorry, you disappeared. You went into a tunnel or something.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now.
Yeah.
Oh,
you hear me?
Yeah, you're back. Quickly, Dave.
I was just going to say, what they've got at the moment is a luxury life in prison with the human rights law protecting them.
Yeah.
So it's for us to get rid of them. It's not for them to be martyrs. It's for us to get rid of them, to save the taxpayer, to save the prison guards, to save them having to preach their vile filth inside prisons.
Yes. I hear you. I was just trying to make the case that actually you need to be very careful when you bring back stuff like this. What about the idea that we put this to a referendum? We say to people, we actually ask the public, do you want to see the death penalty brought back for the most severe cases, those cases where 100% we know that they are guilty?
Yeah, that's a good idea, definitely, and I think it'll have a lot of support for those particular cases, but not for people like Letby where there's any doubt.
Yeah, really good to talk to you. Thank you very much, Dave, for your call this morning. Drive carefully wherever you are going. Good morning, David. Great show as usual. Thank you, Penny in Essex. If Lucy Letby is innocent, why does she write in the diary over and over again, why did I kill those babies? Lots of questions, actually, about this evidence that seems to be coming to light in the big article in the Mail this morning. Peter Cardwell, good morning.
Good morning, David.
How are you?
I'm very well.
Oh, good.
Very
you
well.
seem surprised to see
No.
me.
No. It's not a surprise. Generally, at this time on a Sunday morning, we generally have a chat.
Generally.
Yeah.
So what's coming up?
Well, I am. First of all, death penalty. No. I don't want to be like the 15...
Referendum?
No.
Why?
Because
it's not up to you.
It's a settled issue. Well, it isn't up to
It's
me.
not
but
a settled issue. How is it a settled issue?
Well, you're asking my opinion, and I'm giving it to you.
Yes,
and
but it's
that's
not a settled issue.
Well, it is.
It's settled in your mind.
Yes. Well, it should be settled in other people's minds.
No, it isn't. Why?
Well, if you let me speak, I will answer your question. And that is that I don't want to be like the 15 other countries in the world that have the death penalty. I don't want to be like Saudi Arabia. We show our civilization as a country at how we treat people who are in prison, people who are elderly, people who are vulnerable. I'm not saying we should
What about people who kill children?
Well, I'm not showing any compassion towards them. What I'm saying is that I would much rather that they rot in jail for many years than have a nice injection in the arm and a nice death.
Well,
and there are many people who are gang masters, for example, who live and die by the sword every day, and a nice injection in the arm would be a nice way for them to go.
I hear you. I'm just putting the counter argument.
Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense.
All right. Next.
Well, we're talking to Sir Christopher Chope, who, believe it or not, was there for the last steel nationalisation debate in 1988, and he was there yesterday as well. So we're going to talk about steel. We'll hear a variety of voices, including the government and the opposition. We will also have on the debate desk in this very seat, Johnny Gould will be here, talk presenter, and Stephen Wolfe as well. They'll be talking about these absolute scumbags who are throwing cooking oil and stabbing prison officers at HMP Frankland as well. I know quite a lot about Frankland because he used to work in the Ministry of Justice, and there are lots of very, very nasty people there. £611,000 of legal aid for grooming gangs as well. The English Heritage claiming Easter's not originally Christian.
I've got that article in front of me.
Come on. And Robert Jenrick saying that the lawyer I interviewed on Thursday